If everybody you have a seat, we're going to get started. I will now call to order the meeting of the Omaha Planning Board. The Planning Board members that are here today are Trenton Magid, David Rosacker, Jeffrey Moore, Michael Pate, Patrick Morse, Christine Carnes, Vice Chair, and I am Greg Rosenbaum, Chairman. Members of the city staff that are in attendance today are Dave Fanslau, Planning Director, Sherry Rockwell, Acting Assistant Planning Director, Eric England, Acting Planning Manager, Mike Carter, Planning Board Administrator, Alan Thielen from the City Law Department, and Debbie Hightower and Lisa, Debbie's not here, just Lisa Agins, our Secretary. Our rules of procedure are as follows. Notice of this hearing has been published. This board met this morning, reviewed all the cases. Copies of today's agenda are located on the table in front of us. They're right down here. You're welcome to come up and pick one up. The cases on the consent agenda will be heard first. Consent cases are perceived by the Planning Board to be non-controversial, have already been heard, or been recommended for layover, and therefore will be read and voted on without the opportunity for your testimony. If you wish to testify, you may remove the case from the consent agenda. When each consent case is read, I will ask if anyone wants the case removed. If you do, please stand up and say so, and the case will be removed. This case will then be heard in the order in which it appears on the regular agenda after we go through the consent cases. When the case is heard, you will have the opportunity to come to the podium, state your name and address, and give your testimony at that time. When hearing cases on the regular agenda, the board will first hear from the applicant. After the applicant states their case, we will hear from the proponents, and then we will hear from the opponents. After both sides are heard, the public hearing will be closed, and no additional testimony will be permitted unless a board member requests additional information. When at the podium, please state your name, address, and whom you are representing for the record. Your testimony is very important to us. In the interest of time and courtesy to others, please be short and to the point. We will try to limit each case to 10 minutes. Those directly involved in the case, please speak first. We request that large groups select a spokesperson to represent that group, therefore eliminating repetitive testimony. When giving testimony, please provide new information and try not to repeat what has previously been said. We do ask that all speakers and others be treated with courtesy and with respect. In that regard, please remain silent while seated, and please take time now to turn your cell phones off, if you would. Our decision to approve, deny, or continue a case made here today will be forwarded to the City Council for another public hearing and final disposition by the City Council. Conditional use permits are an exception to this rule. The board's decision made here today on conditional use permits are final and not forwarded to the City Council. Lastly, upon the advice of the Law Department, all communications to the board members from attorneys or other interested parties should be transmitted through the Planning Department so that they are made a part of the public record. The department will then transmit all that information to the board as well as to the rest of the public. Rezoning matters are an exception to this rule. And there is one change to the consent agenda. We are adding agenda item number 18, and it'll be on consent for approval. Okay, I'm going to get started with the consent cases. Case number 6, agenda item number 6, case C12-18-161, applicant Sean Negus. It is on for approval. Request final plat approval of Peaceful Oaks, a minor plat outside the city limits. Property is located within an ED Environmental Resource Overlay District. This was laid over from our August 1st meeting. Location north of Northcrest Drive and west of Post Road. Does anyone wish to have this removed from the consent? Seeing none. Agenda item number 7, case C10-18-166, C12-18-167. Applicant Frank Creighton Trust. It is on for approval. Request preliminary plat approval of Legend Trails, lots 1 through 86, outlots A through K, a subdivision outside the city limits with waivers to section 53-82 street width, section 53-93 curb and gutter, and section 53-99 sidewalks, along with rezoning from AG to DR. This was laid over also from our August 1st meeting. Location northwest of 222nd and Q Streets. Does anyone wish to have this removed from consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll move on. Agenda item number 9, case C10-18-172. Applicant Eric Wiesler. It's on for approval. Request rezoning from GC and R7 to R7. Property is located within an NCE, Neighborhood Conservation Enhancement District. This was laid over from our August 1st meeting. Location southeast of 10th and Pierce Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed? Seeing none, I'll move on. Agenda item number 16, case C12-18-186. Applicant Joseph and Jamie Johnson. It is on for approval. Request preliminary and final plat approval of Backwoods Paradise, a minor plat inside the city limits with a waiver of section 53-99 sidewalks. Property is located within an ED Environmental Resources Overlay District, and portions are located within a flood fringe overlay district. Location 9140 Mormon Bridge Road. Does anyone wish to have this removed from the consent agenda? Seeing none. Agenda item number 17, case C10-18-187, C12-18-188. Applicant GN and Sons Incorporated. It is on for approval. Request preliminary plat approval of the Shire, a subdivision inside the city limits with rezoning from R2 to DR and R4. Location northeast of 72nd Street and Silver Valley Road. Anyone wish to have this removed from consent? Seeing none. Agenda item number 18, case C10-18-190, C12-18-191. Applicant Noddle Companies. We've added this. It's on for approval. Request preliminary and final plat approval of Builders District, a minor plat inside the city limits with a waiver of section 5385 easements, along with rezoning from DS and CBD to CBD. Property is located within an ACI overlay district, ACI 1 overlay district. Location northwest of 15th and Mike Fahey Streets. Anyone wish to have this removed from consent? Seeing none, moving on. Agenda item number 20, case C10-18-194. Applicant Roger Ernst. It is on for approval. Request approval of an ACI 1 Area of Civic Importance Overlay District. Location 555 North 30th Street. Sorry about that. Anyone wish to have this removed from the consent agenda? Moving on. Agenda item number 21, case C10-18-195. Applicant Edward Allstat. It is on for approval. Request approval of an ACI 1 Area of Civic Importance Overlay District. Location 3040 Cumming Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 22, case C10-18-196. Applicant Pedro Hernandez. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from DR to R4, location 5010 South 50th Street. Anyone wish to have this case removed? Seeing none. Agenda item number 23, case C10-18-197, applicant Jesu Housing Incorporated. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from R435 to R4, location 4256 and 4260 Miami Street and 4253 Corby Street. Anyone wish to have this removed? Agenda item number 24, case C10-18-198, applicant Jesu Housing Incorporated. It is on for approval. Request rezoning from R535 to R5, location 4339 Lake Street and 4143 Grant Street. Anyone wish to have this removed from consent? Seeing none? Oh, you did?
We have a move to discussion, is that what?
Yes. If you want to have come up and make a public testimony, you have to remove it from the consent agenda.
And when will it be discussed?
In a regular order. Today.
Today?
Yes.
So we still gotta go through that whole list, only one case left?
Yep.
My father's not clear on, R5, 35 to R5, what that exactly means.
If you want it removed, we'll remove it, and then it'll be taken in the order that it's on the agenda.
To be discussed.
Yes.
Okay.
You'll have the opportunity to come forward
Okay.
and discuss it. Okay.
24.
Yep.
That's 24. Okay. Moving on, agenda item number 26. Case C7-08-006, applicant Creighton Preparatory School. It's on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow a secondary educational facility in a R3 district with the waiver of section 55-166, height to allow a 120-foot tall bell tower, location northwest of 72nd and Western Avenue. Does anyone wish to have this removed from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none. The final case, agenda item number 30, case C7-18-201, applicant Estate Landscape Services Incorporated. It is on for approval. Request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit assumed to allow agricultural sales and services in a CC district. Property is located within an ACI 3 overlay district, and portions of the property is located within the flood fringe and floodway overlay districts. Location 3501 North 72nd Street. Does anyone wish to have this removed from consent? Okay. Those are the consent cases. Do we have a motion for those cases?
I'll make a motion for approval of case numbers 6, 7, 9, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, 22, 23, 26, and 30.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Magid? Yes. Rosecker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Okay, those consent cases are done for the day. If you were here for one of those cases, they've been handled. You can stay, you can watch the proceedings, or you are free to leave. We'll give everybody a second to clear the room, and then we'll start in. The first three cases are administrative cases only. There will be no opportunity.
I have to accuse myself of case number 1.
Okay. There will be no opportunity for public testimony. Agenda item number 1, case C10-18-61, C12-18-62. Applicant Winsodia 204 Center LLC requests final plat approval of West Center Village, formerly West Center Commons, a subdivision located outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to MU. This was laid over from our August 1st meeting. Location southeast of 204th Street and West Center Road. May we hear from the city, please?
Yeah, so this final plat has been laid over a few times at Planning Board. There's been some modifications to the plans and some ongoing discussions with the city and the adjacent property owner to the south. Most of the items have been adequately addressed and can move forward. There's one item that I do want to point out, that Lot 7 currently on the mixed-use plan has 2 unshared access drives along with 1 shared access drive. The regulations dictate only 1 unshared and 1 shared access can be had. So the mixed-use development plan will need to remove one of those access drives before it can go to city council. But the city is recommending approval of the rezoning from AG to MU, subject to submittal of an acceptable mixed-use district development agreement prior to forwarding the request to city council, and approval of the final plat subject to submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding this request to city council.
Do we have any questions or comments? This was administrative only, Larry.
A little bit of a point of order with respect to the motion, because what
Okay.
it's saying is we have to eliminate one of those access points before it can go to city council. I think.
Larry, I need your
Oh,
name
Larry,
and address.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. So I think we were still working with the city on that other access point, because the way that automobile condominium regime works is that it needs that other access, because on days when people are displaying their cars, that whole center drive lane, and I don't have the plan in front of me, will be blocked. So it really needs these shared access points, the way it functions. So I guess my worry and concern is the way the motion is read is that before it goes to council, we have to eliminate that. I think there has to be discussion, or we need to take it to the council and have that discussion at the council. You could certainly make a recommendation that you think that it ought to be removed, but I think having it removed before we go to city council is the problem as far as the motion. So I just wanted to make that a point, because I don't want to be held up here, because we're kind of on a fast track to get that final plat to the city council, and I didn't want that to be a problem moving this plat forward. So
Thank
sorry to
you.
interrupt, but
You just broke all of our rules, Larry. Eric,
So
do you want to make an additional
Yeah,
comment?
my question for law is, typically, the mixed-use plan would show that that access be removed going to city council, and if city council voted to allow that drive back in, that could be changed after city council?
Alan Thielen, City Law Department. Yes, the council could change that to either add or delete that provision.
So I guess the department would stand, to have the mixed-use plan not show that access or remove it before council, and if council saw fit to add that back in, then they could do so.
Okay, is there any other discussion or questions?
I mean, the motion doesn't, or the recommendation doesn't specifically say that as part of the motion. So, I mean, all it says is acceptable mixed-use development agreement. So the council could determine whatever's acceptable.
Yeah, but our documents would have to show something, and city believing that that access should be removed, that would be acceptable to us.
So your recommendation at city council would not be to approve it unless that were to be removed.
So our plans, and we wouldn't send it to city council until we had a plan that showed it removed.
Okay.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
I move approval of the rezoning from AG to MU, subject to the submittal of an acceptable mixed-use district development agreement prior to forwarding the request to city council, and approval of the final plat, subject to the submittal of a final acceptable subdivision agreement prior to forward this request to city council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid? Rosacker?
He recused himself.
Oh, sorry. Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Moving on with the administrative meeting only, agenda item number 2, case C10-18-89, C12-18-90. Applicant Pacific Reserve LLC, Chris Erickson. Request final plat approval of Pacific Reserve, a subdivision outside the city limits, along with rezoning from AG to DR and R5. The location, 20601 Pacific Street. May we hear from the city?
Yeah, so this preliminary plat was recommended for approval by the planning board on June 6th and then approved by city council on August 14th. There's been a few modifications to the plan, the primary item being removal of the gate that was previously shown on the private cul-de-sac, which has now become a public street, so there's no longer a gate. The other items have been adequately addressed. Department is recommending approval of the rezoning from DR to R5, approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval, and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to city council.
Are there any further comments or questions? Do we have a motion?
I move for approval of the rezoning from DR to R5 and approval of the final plat, subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
And Rosacker. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Say what?
Easy, Dave. He's
Okay.
getting- he's sleeping.
Agenda item number 3, case C10-18-131, C12-18-132. Applicant Lauren Johnson, Celebrity Homes. Request final plat approval of Wood Valley West 2, a subdivision outside the city limits with rezoning from AG to R4. Location north of Military Road and west of 147th Street. May we hear from the city?
This preliminary plat was recommended for approval at the July 7th Planning Board meeting and approved by City Council on August 28th. All of the conditions have been adequately addressed. I do want to point out the development will have an access trail to connect to the Military Road, which will become a public trail in the future. Our calculations indicate that the grade for this trail is at an unacceptable grade at this time. So the applicant will need to provide us documentation that this outlot can meet handicap accessibility, or the outlot will have to be moved to a new location that can meet handicap accessibility to that trail. The department is recommending approval of the rezoning from AG to R4 and approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and addressing the 2 items listed in your report prior to forwarding the request to City Council.
Is there any questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
Move approval of the final plat, approval of the rezoning from AG to R4, approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and addressing the 2 items listed in the recommendations in the request to the city council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Okay, agenda item number 4, case C3-18-82. Applicant Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. Request approval of the Builders District at NoDo Redevelopment Plan, formerly Kiewit Headquarters Campus Redevelopment Plan. This was laid over from the June 6th meeting. Location, an area generally bound by Cumming Street on the north, 22nd Street on the west, 15th Street on the east, Mike Fahey Street on the south, along with an area generally bound by Mike Fahey Street on the north, 14th Street on the east, Cass Street on the south, and 17th Street on the west. Jennifer, are you presenting this?
Good afternoon, members of the Planning Board. Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. Before you, you have a redevelopment plan for the area so eloquently described recently. It's a little bit of an odd-shaped area, but it's generally as was referenced. This plan originally came to us as a plan to create a new campus headquarters for Kiewit. As we worked through that and with the developer, I think some additional companies and additional opportunities were identified. So what we did was we created a larger redevelopment plan area. And what this plan does is it allows us to identify this larger area, not only to allow for the project that Kiewit and Nautilus companies will describe shortly, but also to hopefully spur additional development in the area. So a number of the properties in the area are owned by First National or Creighton or Union Pacific as well as Kiewit, but there are a number of properties in the area that are underutilized, are industrial commercial uses that we think either vacant or used for parking, that could be redeveloped and spur additional development in this area. As we all well know, north of Cumming Street, north downtown has undergone some great redevelopment. We've had some other redevelopment that has been spurred by the CenturyLink Center. It's actually something that the CHI Health Center, and TD Ameritrade Park, but this particular area has not enjoyed that same amount of redevelopment. So we're hoping that this project and this redevelopment plan will spur that eventual development. You'll note in your redevelopment plan that there are some general concepts identified, as well as we have addressed concerns about parking. Should some of this development that we hope will happen actually occur, as a part of this plan, then we will do a traffic study, and if pursuant to that traffic study we need to, let's say, build or create additional parking, the city will work with local property owners to identify a spot within the district in order to provide that additional parking. I know Mr. Noddle and Mr. Setzman are here to answer any additional questions and probably give you some additional information, but I can answer any questions you may have. If not, Jay?
Are there any other proponents?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, members of the city staff. I'm Jay Noddle with Noddle Companies, 2285 South 67th Street in Exarban Village. Really pleased to be here. And before I present this project to you, I want to say that the thinking for this project really began the day that the ribbon was cut and the Kiewit University project was completed. When we got to June, where there was a request for a layover, it was because there was some momentum building and it looked like the project area and the number of stakeholders and so forth could increase quickly, and that the size of the redevelopment area and the projects that would go within this area could be dramatically bigger and have a much greater impact on our urban core and specifically on the area north of the interstate. So with that, I'm going to try to do this. Looks like we're out of order here. Bear with me. Here we go. So as Jennifer said, this is the district. It comprises about 12 full blocks. The major property owners in the district are Kiewit, Creighton University, Union Pacific, the Maxi Walker organization, and Sauls, Bruce Kyman. This puts the district in perspective with the downtown area. So as you can see, it in size and geography is really very significant. This is an image that shows the as-built condition in the district today. And I recognize this isn't in perfect 3D, but as you can see, other than the TD Ameritrade ballpark and the Creighton soccer complex, most of the buildings are a little bit lower profiled. Very important. All the business owners and property owners in this neighborhood are just as important as business owners and property owners are in any other neighborhood. But you can see some of the properties are somewhat underutilized with respect to density. This image shows what we believe the development can and will look like at full build-out. The blue buildings are either academic or athletic facilities. You might call those institutional facilities. The buildings in yellow are primarily residential. The buildings in red are office buildings, and both the residential and office buildings, as well as future parking structures, are thought to be planned to have some amount of retail on the first floor. Not a lot. We've learned some lessons as an industry, as a developer. Nodal Companies has learned a few lessons. In this day and age, a little bit less retail usually has a little bit better outcome for the retailers and therefore the project and the community. No one wants to see a retailer get open too soon, so to speak, and then struggle. And so we're going to go slow with retail. And then this is the Kiewit headquarters itself. And this is a consolidation of a few Kiewit facilities in the city, primarily Kiewit Plaza and a couple small ancillary facilities. It will be their new global headquarters. It will connect to Kiewit University. And what you're going to see now is just the first phase of the Kiewit campus, if you will. So this is an image looking from the east to the west, up Mike Fahey, kind of from TD Ameritrade looking west. Here's an image looking from the northeast to the southwest. A little bit of an aerial, and here you can see the building fronts on Fahey is connected to the Kiewit University to the east, and then there is parking to the west, to the north of the initial office building for Kiewit. And then this is an image of the entire district looking north. Now here's a shot looking up Mike Fahey, and this gets really exciting. There's a number of neighborhoods and developments in other communities. One that people are pretty familiar with is the Rhino neighborhood, River North, just north of downtown Denver. Very similar in style. The idea and the plan here is to construct buildings that are a little bit lower profile, that are a mix of uses, both vertically and horizontally, that really fit in and work together. And Fahey then becomes the spine for this whole area and connects the soccer field all the way to the Mecca facilities. This gives you an idea of square footage and value of the different uses planned for the area. There's about 550,000 feet of office space. There are over 350 apartments or condominiums. There is, as I mentioned earlier, a little bit of retail, just a taste of retail. We don't want to plan for too much, and we certainly don't want to do anything that is detrimental to the business owners that have already taken a risk in the neighborhood and opened up their retail establishments. Then there is planned parking at a ratio that is above city code. We believe that office parking ought to be built at about 4 parking stalls per 1,000 square feet of usable space. So our ratios are right on that mark. Total investment, at least $300 million. If this was built today, it would be at least $300 million based on what we know construction costs to be today. Now, obviously, this won't all be built right away, but certainly we're going to get a great start with the Kiewit headquarters, and I think a couple other smaller projects will want to go almost immediately. So it's a big investment. A few of the issues that we're working on, there has been an issue with truck traffic in this neighborhood for a long time. The folks that are working north of Cummings have an issue and some concerns about truck traffic. We have the same kinds of issues, so we've retained a consultant to work with us at the mayor's request to study what can be done to modify or improve truck circulation and traffic through the area. We're also working with a whole group of stakeholders to study the route that our homeless population takes during the day, both ends of the daylight hours, because this area is going to become more and more active, and we want to make sure that their safety is well thought about and cared for. So lots of things going on, planning on starting as soon as the city council approves the project and the weather permits. So the Kiewit headquarters, their associated parking and utility relocation and expansion will happen in the spring at the latest, assuming we get the city council approval. I just want to publicly thank Mayor Stothert and her staff, all the different department heads, as you would imagine, and I think you know, City Law Department, Public Works, Planning, Finance, and other representatives of the city have spent a lot of time working with us on this. And I'd also like to thank our other stakeholders in the neighborhood. First, we'll start with the city, Union Pacific Railroad Company, First National Bank, and Creighton University. It's going to be a great project for our community, and we're looking forward to getting started. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Jay, I missed, I was paying attention to something else. What'd you say about the parking stalls, your ratio?
We work off 4 per 1,000 per usable square feet for office.
4 per 1,000, okay, gotcha.
City code's less
I wrote
than
it
that.
down wrong. And
All different kinds of ratios people use, but we found with the last 10 or 12 office building projects we've done, including Exarban Village, that to be at 4 per 1,000 on the usable, quite frankly, is more than we need. If we went for a drive through Exarban Village and got into the parking structures, you'd see there are plenty of parking stalls that really don't even have oil stains in them. So we know that that's a number that works, and it leases, and that's how we arrived at that ratio.
I was thinking about something you had said before that, and I wrote it down as 4,000 square foot
I may
per
have said
stall,
that.
and I go, wait a second.
I may have said that. You never know
That's
these
okay,
days.
we got it, so, all right.
Make sure you're working on the truck traffic. I know that's been a big issue. How about, are there any streets that are going to be closed or rerouted?
Yes, there wouldn't be any streets that are rerouted, but when we get to the end, Birch Street between 15th and 16th, and then in the future, 16th and 17th would be vacated to create larger development sites. California Street between 13th and 14th, south of the UP child care facility, would likely be vacated over time, again, to create potentially an opportunity for more child care in the area. It doesn't mean it has to go there, but there's going to be a need. We already know of a need for Creighton. We understand that we know of a need for Kiewit. We understand that Creighton may have a need for more room for more kids in child care. So we want to make sure that if it wants to be contiguous, if that makes the most sense, that can happen. And then further west, Birch Street from, I think it's 18th Street west into the Creighton campus would likely be vacated to make larger development sites for facilities they want to build along Cummings.
So all that, you have to go through the process of buying it from the city?
Yeah, whatever the statutory process is, that's correct.
Is there any effect on neighboring businesses around this district that are going to stay in place? Has there been any opposition or any conversations with them?
There's been quite a lot of conversations, actually. Several of the properties have already been acquired. One business relocated the session room, moved from one side of the Kiewit head plant site to into the new apartment building that was built by the Logier Group. We are in the process of negotiations with Maxi Walker. We have been working with Mr. Kyman, who is now designated a new representative, and so we're we've reached out to that individual. And then the others, we have been working with on a case-by-case basis.
Thank you.
Jay, I assume you've already had conversations with Creighton University with regard to the potential uses of the institutional project that you've got there.
Yes.
And there's probably a need for that. And then you're going to have quite a bit of office space too, but I'd be curious of your perspective. When I take a look at all of the plans for downtown Omaha, the riverfront development and some of the redevelopment happening at Blackstone and Midtown Crossing, how do you feel about I know activity breeds activity, but is there enough demand to fill all of the needs that not only exist today, but what potentially could exist with all of these developments coming online?
Today, there isn't enough demand, and I guess you'd say the cream is going to rise to the top. What's neat about this project is that it's ready to go. Kiewit will start immediately, and we're going to move the corporate headquarters of a Fortune 500 company right into the middle of this area and place it between Creighton and the Mecca facilities. Do it in such a way that it times up really nicely with the first phases of the riverfront revitalization. So we're expecting quite a lot of activity immediately in this area. And one of the things that happens when a redevelopment plan like this is put together and it's got the combination of tools in it that most redevelopment plans have, and it will have the availability of land. The land will be there, it'll be ready. You could say it will be entitled, it'll be eligible for tax increment financing to the extent that a project qualifies. It's still got to qualify. And the city has made the commitment that should studies with the appropriate metrics included in the studies, so it's not parking at 1 per thousand, it's parking at some greater number, probably 4, which is really what business needs in spite of what some codes might say. The city has stepped up in a big way and said, when the time comes, we're going to initiate a study, and if the study validates the need for parking, the city will construct the parking and then lease it to the users at a market rate. So when you get organized like that, it's been our experience that things can work pretty darn well. We've seen it 4 or 5 times in the last 20 years in projects that we've been involved in. So we feel really good about this. We feel great about the location. Certainly there's a lot of other opportunity that exists and opportunities that will be created in the urban core. And we all know what those sites are. I would submit, I think this area will go first because there's an actual need that Kiewit has and they're ready to go. You got to give Kiewit a lot of credit for having the desire to work on a broader vision and then involve the other stakeholders that I mentioned, and everybody says, this is great, let's go.
How long do you think it'll take for this entire development to fill in?
I don't think it'll be 10 years. I think it'll be less. When you think about it, it's not that much land. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, it really isn't. And if you just fast forward to the day that the Kiewit headquarters is complete, and you've got a good portion of the riverfront redevelopment complete, and there's more going on north of Cummings. I think many of us know that there's a lot of interest and activity north of Cummings. Well, all of a sudden, this area is going to fill in pretty quick, I think.
Okay, thanks.
What could you remind us of the population count? You know, there's Kiewit University and their headquarters all together. I know you stated the square footage. How does that relate to people?
The Kiewit headquarters on any given day, let's start there, on any given day has about 600 people. A lot of people travel, both in and out of town, so about 600 people. And then Kiewit University handles about, I can say it to you this way, they use about 12,000 hotel room nights a year. I think they're the largest hotel room consumer of the corporate community in the area. And so they're bringing a a workforce of 3,000 to 4,000 people a year into Kiewit University from outside the area, and then it is used for local purposes and for a few other reasons. So a lot of activity right there. Anything else?
Any other questions, comments?
Thank you
Jay.
all very much.
Thank you, Jay. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak?
Let's see.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Kevin Anderson, City of Omaha Mayor's Office. I wanted to come and kind of describe the city's participation in the project in partnership with the developer. This is a project identified, the original project was identified in the 2019 Capital Improvement Plan. And as you're aware, that's a process that programs funding for projects throughout the city. We're able to include projects like this within the city's bonding capacity. And based off of the expansion of the project, we're able to comfortably fulfill the request of the city's participation to incentivize and provide public improvements throughout the project area based off of natural growth of that bonding capacity, but as well as through the deobligation of revenue bonds for a particular project identified and removed in the 2018 through the 2019 CIP plan, that being the Crossroads redevelopment. Now, what that allows us to do, and again, it just provides the bonding capacity through redevelopment bonds to be distributed and reallocated throughout the city on projects throughout the city. So while it's not a dollar for dollar exchange, the removal of that from the capital improvement plan based off of the dropping of the agreement we had with the developer at the time for the Crossroads Mall, again, allows for that increase in bonding capacity to be distributed. And certainly this and other projects throughout the city were, quote unquote, or for lack of a better term, recipients of that additional capacity found through the deobligation of some of those funds. But I do want to make clear that it's not a dollar for dollar exchange, and in no way limits or precludes the city's ability to partner in finding and participating in a project that generates from the Crossroads Mall redevelopment, or frankly anywhere else in the city, because we're able to capture not only the renewed bonding capacity, but through natural growth of the city's bonding capacity, able to participate in the expansion of the project as proposed by the developer. So with that, happy to continue partnering with the developer in this project and answer any questions.
Any questions for Kevin? I think he answered most of them upstairs in the pre-meeting. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.
Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Okay, are there any opponents? Come down, give your name and address, please.
My name is Tonya Cooper, and I'm the president of OIC Neighborhood Association. And I'm not necessarily an opponent. I just have a few concerns and some questions.
Do you have an address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
2025 Maple Street, Omaha, Nebraska, 68110.
Thank you.
Okay. So first, one of my first questions would be for the land that is not owned by the entities that are mentioned, how are you planning to acquire this land? I would like to know how they're planning to acquire the land, and are there any aggressive measures that are going to be used for those people that own that land, like blighted and substandard, which to us is in the North Omaha area, is a backdoor to eminent domain. So that's like a question that I would have. That's one of the questions that I have. And another question that I have, as far as the TIF funding goes, how is the TIF funding for North Omaha going to be affected going forward, since the Kiewit building is going to bring in all these people, this massive amounts of money, and now you have these other buildings that are going to be around it? How is that going to affect North Omaha in getting funding in the future? That's the first piece. And then the second piece is, why does Kiewit need TIF funding? Because we all know that TIF funding is for low-income areas, and we know that Kiewit is not low-income. So that's my other question. And my third issue is the timing of the notices that are received by the neighborhood associations. The notice was sent out to us on the 21st. By the time it goes through the post office and everything, is the end of the month, which ran into the Labor Day celebrations and all that stuff, and then we're here today. So a lot of the people that wanted to come were unable to because the notices ran a little bit late. And I'm also the vice president of 24th Street Corridor, so I'm speaking on behalf of that entity and of OIC Neighborhood Association and Long School Association of Juanita Johnson because she could not be here today. So she's asking, that question actually came from her because she would like to attend some of these meetings, but she would need a little bit more notification. And so those are my concerns.
Okay. They'll be addressed here shortly, so, okay. Are there any other opponents that wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Jennifer, were you wanting to come up and address the questions?
Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. I can address a number of those questions, and I think Mr. Noddle will be able to respond on behalf of Kiewit. When it comes to tax increment, let's see, the first question was regarding acquisition of property.
Yes.
This is a redevelopment plan. The redevelopment plan allows us to do a number of different things. Primarily, it allows us to invest redevelopment bond funding into the area to assist in acquisition, demolition, site development, relocation, as needed under the community development law. Mr. Anderson kind of addressed how that bond funding is coming and will be used. The redevelopment plan also allows us to utilize eminent domain as a tool to acquire properties if absolutely necessary, but that is something that would be determined at a much later date and time and only if necessary. I think at present, any properties that need to be acquired to move forward with projects in this plan area are being worked about privately to acquire those properties. So that's, any aggressive measures that may have been mentioned are not necessarily being considered specifically right now. With regard to tax increment financing, I would point out that tax increment financing is intended to assist the redevelopment of underutilized and or vacant areas. So what you find a lot in this area and where some of the potential projects will go are actually properties that are currently underutilized and or vacant. So in order to assist a developer to come in, acquire the property, undertake the necessary demolition, the necessary environmental remediation, and to build in these properties where they have not been used for several years. To some extent, a lot of them have been industrial, parking, unused vacant parcels for several years. That takes an additional amount of funding that you don't have to undertake when you do what we call greenfield development. When it's brand new ground, you don't have those additional expenses. So tax increment financing is a tool that is available to developers and to cities in order to assist in addressing those increased costs that come with this kind of urban infill redevelopment. But just because we employ the use of potential tax increment financing here in this district does not by any means take away the opportunity to utilize that tool and that funding in any other area of North Omaha. I think that addressed most of those questions. Jay, do you want to?
Thank you. Good questions. Let me, I guess I need to say again, I'm Jay
Yes,
Novel.
please. An address, if you would.
2285 South 67th Street in
Thank you.
Exarban Village. A couple things. First, with respect to acquisition of property, I want to reiterate what Jennifer just said. We are in private discussions with all the property owners whose properties are required for one piece of this in the first phases. There may be other properties that different stakeholders want to acquire in the future, but those discussions have not begun. So we are working on things that are essential and necessary for Kiewit. Things that could be essential or necessary for Creighton in the future, just as an example, those discussions have not commenced. I can tell you that the church along Cummings is not part of the redevelopment area on purpose. Those discussions, whatever happens there, if anything happens in the future, will be between Creighton University and the church. Secondly, Kiewit is not using tax increment financing. The tax increment financing that we talked about earlier and that Jennifer talked about will be TIF that is available for projects that happen in the district other than Kiewit, and to the extent that they are qualified projects. So Kiewit's not using TIF. Kiewit is using benefits they receive under a state legislative package, and so they have decided to forego the use of TIF, which actually makes it easier then for the city to help participate in providing some funding for some of the other things we've talked about today. And then with respect to the notices, I don't know if you mentioned the notices. We don't have anything to do with the notices. So I certainly apologize if you didn't get notices in a more timely manner, but maybe the city can work on that in the future. I don't know how that works.
Okay. We can have Eric or Jennifer address the notice. But thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. My apologies, I sat on my pen and forgot to write that question down. The notices are given as required under the community development law. So the community development law, as also was recently amended, actually now requires that redevelopment plans be heard at the planning board stage as well as the city council stage, and also dictates the time frame with which we send out notices, which I believe is a minimum of 10 days prior to the meeting. And so we comply with the law when we send those notices out. Are there any other questions I can answer?
Okay. Thank you. Any additional questions or comments from the board? Eric, did you want to?
Nope, just city recommends approval.
Okay. Do we have a motion? Second. We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore.
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 5, case C10-18-3, C12-18-4. Applicant Justin Shanahan requests preliminary and final plat approval of the Ridges Replat 15, a minor plat inside the city limits with rezoning from DR to DR and R4. This was laid over from our January meeting. Location, south of Shadow Ridge Drive and east of 186th Street.
Mr. Chair, I'm recusing myself.
Okay. May we hear from the applicant's representative, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, members of the board, Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. With me today is Justin and Ellen Shanahan. This proposed single-family additional lot will be their personal residence. Also with me today is Steve Shanahan, the owner of the Shadow Ridge Country Club. They're primarily here to answer any questions and then also respond to any opposition if need be. So if you recall, this is a layover case from January 3rd of this year. It was primarily laid over to take some time to meet with the neighbors surrounding this proposed single-family residential lot. Those meetings have occurred, and there was also an intervening project that also occurred that you're familiar with. Just to point out, there's really only about 4 lots that actually abut this particular single-family residential lot that we're proposing today. And I'll have some photos here in a minute to share with you. But essentially, the property owner to the north and the property owner to the east have no objection to this particular development of this single-family residential home. The only people who have raised some objection are the property owner primarily to the west, and there's one additional property owner immediately to the kind of south and west of this proposed lot that was at the last planning board meeting. I don't know if he's here today. Again, there were a number of meetings with them trying to work out some solution that would be acceptable to all. So today we're here for preliminary plat, final plat approval, recommendation for approval, and also the rezoning from DR to DR and R4 because the subdivision includes a portion of the outlot or lot that, I guess it's a lot that hole number 8 is actually situated on. And then also later, there's a minor amendment to the outdoor sports and recreation special use permit, which will be administrative because it is minor in nature based upon what's being proposed here today. So this is just to show you sort of an overview of the lot we're talking about. And it's this lot here, which is hole number 8 of the golf course. The proposed single-family residential house is on the north side of that hole, just south of Shadow Ridge Drive, and in between these two particular houses. So just to get an idea of the area we're talking about here. And I think it's important to note that we're not doing anything with respect to the hole number 8. It will still be a golf course hole. It will still have a tee box. It will still have a fairway. It'll still have the rough. It'll still have hazards such as the sand traps. It's since been renovated since you see this older aerial photograph. So there's a little bit of change with respect to the sand traps. But it still has a green, a hole, and a pin. So that will function just as it did yesterday, as it will tomorrow. So there's no change with respect to the golf course in that regard. So what this really is surplus or excess property that really is unused, and it's in this particular location right here. And this, of course, is Shadow Ridge Drive. This is the green for hole number 8. This is the property owner immediately to the west. This, as you can see, their line of sight, if they could see it, I'll show another photograph here where there's so much landscaping you really can't see it anyway as far as the green. But if this landscaping was not here, this would be their line of sight, which does not change. They still have the same golf course view tomorrow as they do today. The trap is here, the green is here, fairway's here. The property we're talking about is up here. This is another depiction that I think we had at the last meeting that we didn't even present because we agreed to the layover. But again, the house to the east has no objection. The house to the north has no objection across from Shadow Ridge Drive. And then, of course, you have this house to the west, who are the primary opponents here, again, showing their line of sight to the golf course itself and showing the proposed structure here that is not in their view at all with respect to the golf course. Again, this is showing the proposed single-family residential lot here just south of Shadow Ridge Drive between the house to the east. There's the house to the north. And then over here is the house to the west that you can see. One of the questions I think that came up at the January 3rd meeting was, how does this work as far as elevations? Because I think people noted when I think you drove out there last time, I don't think you drive out there anymore to these particular sites. But I think the comment was it drops off pretty significantly from Shadow Ridge Drive, and are we going to have retaining walls and all this other stuff here in the back? And so what we did is we prepared a proposed grading plan that would support a single-family residential house at this location. It could be a 1.5 story, it could be a 2-story. In any event, it shows that there are no retaining walls required, that there's enough space within this area that you can grade it out without the use of any retaining walls. Again, property over here to the west, property to the east.
Larry,
And then, yes.
excuse me, so at the bottom of that, or I guess that would be to the south. Looks like there's quite a grade change there.
It's about, I think I counted the contours, and it's about 21 feet from Shadow Ridge Drive to this location here. But again, there's enough area there to make up that grade where there's no retaining walls necessary, and they don't propose to construct any retaining walls. And we'll get to this in a little bit, but they are going to subject this lot to the covenants with respect to the design review board, and that's currently all that governs this particular lot now as it sits as a golf course, and I'll get into that in a little bit here as far as the covenants are concerned. But what we did, or what the Shanahans did, is they actually had a drone fly over, and this is the house immediately to the west. And then you can see there's a substantial distance with a substantial amount of landscaping. Here would be the green, if you recall from those prior photographs. A lot of landscaping here. You got the golf cart path, you got the house to the west, and then of course a lot of distance and the proposed residential house being located here. This is an interesting photograph because this actually shows when they flew the drone, they took it as where the residential house would be constructed, and they put it up about 55 feet in elevation, which is a substantial elevation height, and that'd be the very, very peak of a two-story house, if not greater. And you can barely see the roof of the house to the west here above the trees. So there's no view whatsoever as far as a line of sight between the house to the west and the proposed house that would be constructed here. And again, this is at a 55-foot elevation looking across. And I don't know if I can zoom in on the rooftop, but you can see it just barely over that tree canopy there. So
Will any of those trees there to the east of the cart path be removed?
I believe that the trees are primarily going to be preserved, and I'll show you. Here's the proposed lot again. All these trees over here, I don't believe will be touched. Is that?
They're on their property. A lot of those trees that you're pointing to the western area are on.
They're on the Campbell's property to the west, yeah. So apparently, yeah, here I'll try to get you a better. A lot of these trees apparently are on their property, not on the golf course lot. So no, we don't plan on removing any of those trees.
One's in the foreground there.
Yeah. The foreground here on this side, we don't have an exact plan with respect to the house, but the point is that it has to be approved. The actual structure and architectural components of the house have to be approved by the Design Review Board, which they will subject the plans to. As far as the number of trees, they don't have an exact footprint as to what they're going to construct. It could be, again, a 1.5 story, it could be a 2-story, but I would venture to guess that the vast majority of these trees will be preserved because obviously it's a nice buffer between the Shanahan's proposed house as well and to the house to the west. I guess I should show you there's only about one modification to the golf course, and that's depicted by this particular photograph. You can see that the existing cart path is in this location. The cart path will be realigned, and I believe it has potentially been realigned at this point to this location here to make way for this particular house. But you can see where this house is situated right now, all of those trees are untouched. Whether they'll be touched or not, I don't know with respect to the plan. So again, I think the telling photo though is this 55-foot elevation. Even if those trees weren't there, there's no towering effect or anything else. In fact, they look down on this particular house as opposed to the Shanahan's house looking down upon them. This is a photograph that I actually took from the pin itself. So here's the hole number 8 green, here's the flag and the pin, sand trap. The Campbell's house is back behind there. You can't even see their house from this particular location. I have a number of other photographs, aerials, if you care to see from different angles. But it brings us down to, and I know this, the city doesn't typically get into issues relating to covenants, and I understand why, and I'm a proponent of why they don't get into covenants. But in this particular case, the covenants do not apply to the golf course lots at all, except for the Design Review Board's approval of any structures or anything that would be built on the golf course lots. And that's right here, and I can submit these for the record. But it essentially says that the lots, which are the golf course lots, comprise the property herein referenced as the golf course or Shadow Ridge Golf Course. These lots comprising the golf course are included within and bound in all respects by the covenants set forth relative to Design Review Board, inclusive of the requirement of the Design Review Board approval of all improvements, structural and landscaping. So with respect to design review, they are subjected to the covenants, the golf course lots. With respect to everything else, these covenants or these lots are expressly exempted from all provisions here and relative to homeowners association assessments, dues, financial obligations, membership, and voting entitlements. So the only aspect of this is the design review portion of the development. And I guess I would add, and I think I have a document here somewhere, but the design review board right here. The design review board has reviewed this proposal as far as the replatting and rezoning, and they've approved it, subject to a couple of things. One of the things that they subjected it to is that this particular single-family residential lot will be included into the Cherry Ridge subdivision or portion of the Ridges. So the the design review board will actually be able to review the architectural components of what they're intending to build, and it'll be subject to those covenants, and they will pay dues in the Cherry Ridge portion of the Ridges. If you recall, the Ridges are comprised of a whole bunch of different kind of neighborhoods within the Ridges. There's Cherry Ridge, there's Double Creek Estates, there's Cinnamon Ridge, there's Saddle Creek. There's a bunch of different ridges. This one will actually be included into the Cherry Ridge development, and will pay dues to the Cherry Ridge swimming pools, for example, and to the HOA as far as assessments. I think what the HOA found, or the Design Review Board found, is that this is consistent with the integrity and character of the neighborhood, and what's being proposed and what will be constructed will also be within the character and integrity of the neighborhood, and will preserve the value and the amenities of the neighborhood. So with that, we appreciate the recommendation of the planning department, and we find that it's consistent with the master plan, which is kind of the key here. And we talked about this before, is that this is master plan for low-density residential housing, which obviously this is one lot that in a subdivision of, I think, 685 lots. So it does not increase the density significantly. I believe that it is truly surplus property. It's unused property. It's better served by being a single-family residential lot within the subdivision. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, the Shanahans are here also to answer any questions and to respond to any opposition.
Okay, thank you, Larry. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Are there any opponents that wish to speak? Come forward and give your name and address, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Robert Campbell, and my personal residence is 1801 South 186th Street. Thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my family and many other families in the Ridges neighborhood. This rezoning proposal, creating a residential lot out of a golf course land, directly affects my family, as we live adjacent to the golf course in the area being discussed, the Ridges Replat 15. So just want to make 5 points. I'll try to be brief today. Point number 1, we're asking you to see the replat number 15 from our perspective. This proposed replat has a significant direct and negative impact on our family. We are appealing to you as fellow Omaha homeowners. We ask you to think about how you would feel if this was happening to you. In reflection, no reasonable person would have anticipated a home with a golf course lot purchased in the Ridges would be in danger of having a house built on the golf course directly behind them. In fact, we bought our house and that lot primarily because it is a golf course lot with no residences behind it. There was never any indication of on any planning document or marketing materials that the golf course lot we purchased would have a house built on that land. A picture is worth 1,000 words, so I would show you the map of the Ridges Master Plan community. Just give me 1 second here. Okay. Okay. And so just to get your bearings, we're talking about, this is the lot where my wife and I live here, and you've seen lots of pictures already of that. And this is the 8th green, okay? And you see the shrubbery around there. And in fact, if I just slide this up, this is the entity, oh, can you see that I circled there? This is the entity, the golf club, which is part of the original marketing material, and they were part of this whole subdivision. So, you know, clearly a reasonable person would say, well, who would, there's no lot line there. There's trees around there. If it was planned to be a lot, it would make sense that they would have carved it out and put it in some type of planning document. In fact, they did in this respect, because in this particular area, this says future residential. So at least in fairness, they did indicate to potential buyers that there was an area that would be future residential, okay? But nothing in here ever indicates that there'd be any future lots built there, okay? There's no question about it that this rezoning has a direct negative impact on our family and the investment that we made when we chose this home. Point number 2 is we are also asking you to see this from the perspective of the Ridges neighborhood. Roughly 25 years ago, this neighborhood was designed and marketed as a golf course community. People bought or had their homes built based on the plan that was approved by the zoning board and the city council. The marketing materials for the Ridges have been provided to the planning board. Our neighbors fully and rightfully never expected that decades after those decisions were made and approvals made, that a proposal would be submitted for approval that would permit the shoehorning of a residential lot or lots here and there under the guise that the land is in some way unused. That unused land provides vistas of green space that is part of the golf course. The plot layout confirms this that I just showed you. This replot has a broader impact, an unwelcomed and negative impact to the Ridges neighborhood. We're asking you to see it from the perspective of a neighborhood of people who fully and rightfully expect that extra houses would and should not be shoehorned into the Ridges on the golf course land, impacting the community as a whole. The Ridges community rightfully expected that this master plan completed community with well-marked areas, zones, and marketed as a golf course would remain the golf course in its entirety. And in fact, I talked about the neighbors and the neighborhood, and part of the submission to the city was a petition that was signed by more than 140 residents of the Ridges that were opposed to replat number 15 that we're talking about, okay? So they might not be directly affected by this, but in principle, they do not want to see a lot carved out of the golf course and shoehorned behind them as well. Point number 3, we're asking you to understand why we have made such strong efforts to oppose this rezoning. Well, simply put, we sought legal counsel in this matter, and our attorney, Mike Deegan of Kutak Rock, believes this replat proposal is illegal. Convinced of this, we are choosing to stand up for our legal rights as property owners protected by covenants. Any one of you, I would think, would do the same if you believe that you are on the right side of the law. Number 4, we're asking you to see this from our family's perspective. Very upset that the only way that this may be, upset that the only way may be that we are forced into expensive and time-consuming litigation, all to protect and preserve our property rights. We have come to understand that the Omaha City Council members are empowered to use discretion and sound judgment and see this replat for its substance and not just for its form. Additionally, we have come to understand and be very thankful that the City Council has the opinion to review the legal precedents that would stop this replat proposal in court, and therefore they can deny this replat proposal. Lastly and finally, I'd like to read 3 important and pertinent sentences from a letter sent from our attorney, provided to the members of this board, and I'll put it up on the screen and I'll read it for you. And I'll highlight it. It's probably difficult to read. Just put it up there. We can see it. Okay. The Ridges was marketed and developed pursuant to a common development plan with portions of the property dedicated to the golf course. And this is addressed to the applicant. Your plan to redevelop portions of the golf course for residential development would violate express and implied restrictive covenants burdening the golf course property. As the Nebraska Supreme Court made clear in a case involving nearly identical facts, a golf course developed as part of a common development plan such as the Ridges must be maintained as a golf course. And it refers to that case, Skyline Woods Homeowners Association, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Lastly, I want to thank you and the board for this opportunity, and thank you for your time and thoughtful consideration of our family's perspective on the rezoning proposal. One last thing I forgot to mention too is you saw a lot of different pictures, okay? And these pictures from the golf hole to different areas, etc. But I'd like to show you a picture or pictures from our perspective, okay? So this is a picture. This is from our dining room window, okay? And as you can see, it's fairly easy to see all of this land here. There's no leaves on these trees now, and there aren't for 6 months of the year. So you can clearly see that there are a few trees on the property, but I think that overview that was provided to you was a little bit misleading in that there are also a bunch of trees in behind here that we as a property owners do not own. Here's another very, very similar spot, but from our family room window. Okay, gives you a perspective of what we see as a homeowner looking out on the property. Okay, and here's one that is right on our property line. Okay, so you can see that it's fairly easy to see the construction that was taking place here, the golf paths that's here, and I think the pictures that you saw before are, you know, the typical pictures that you have a photographer show of a home that you're trying to sell, which makes the room look so much bigger or so much farther away. This is really gives you a perspective of where and this is our fence, in fact, okay? And I talked about also the neighborhood and the vistas. Well, this is coming from the path that is right by the golf course. So somebody, you know, in the neighbor coming by, well, the proposal would be to see a house there, okay, and not see the green, okay, not see the vistas, not see the trees, okay, here, which is part of a golf community. And that's what you want to see. That's what you buy a golf course lot for, okay? So hopefully that gives you perspective from myself and my wife and our family as to this replat. And if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you at this time.
Thank you, Robert.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other opponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Larry, did you want to come up and address some of Robert's
I do. Thank you,
items?
Mr. Chair, members of the board. Larry Jobin, 11440 West Center Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant. As far as the significant negative impact to this particular lot, their house, I don't believe that's in fact the case. I mean, this is going to be comparable in many ways, if not exceeding the value of the homes that are adjacent to them to the west and the south. This will be within the Cherry Ridge portion of the ridges, so I think it was anticipated that the house would be $800,000 plus as far as the construction of this particular house. And as far as the covenants and what people expect or anticipate, the covenants, if you read them, clearly say that the golf course lots are not subject to these covenants, except for the design review board and any improvements that might be constructed on the golf course lots. It doesn't say lock them in. It says that the golf course can't be anything, it's not even the golf course, that portions of the property that are within the golf course lot can't be used for anything else. All it says is if you're going to build a structure, it has to be reviewed by the design review board. In this particular case, all the covenants really say is it's supposed to be an 18-hole championship golf course, which it is. In fact, the Shanahans are in the process of completing, I believe, a $5 million renovation to the golf course and clubhouse. They have every intention of keeping the investment up. It's an 18-hole golf course yesterday, it's an 18-hole golf course today, and it's going to be an 18-hole championship golf course tomorrow. Nothing is changing with respect to the golf course. And all that needs to be done is any improvements on these lots has to go to the design review board, which it has, and which the design review board has found that it's consistent with the integrity and character of the neighborhood. So that's with respect to the item number one. Number two, I guess it falls into that same category. The golf course is, not one hole is being modified or adjusted other than being a golf course. So there were some sand traps that were relocated, some tee boxes that were redone, and some greens that were redone, but the golf course exists essentially exactly the way it did, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, as it does today and will tomorrow, except for the improvements or modifications. As far as the petition that was signed by the neighbors, I think, we went through this last time based upon that pamphlet or brochure was handed out to the various neighbors, and I believe that a lot of those signatures were probably people that were scared into signing this because there was a number of falsehoods, I think, and misrepresentations on the pamphlet that went out to the various neighbors. I mean, they started out saying that they were chopping up the golf course, that it was going to hurt property values, that it was going to do all sorts of horrible, terrible things to the neighborhood. And that's just simply not the case, and it's not true. And so what do people do? Again, I think I brought up the Chicken Little or Henny Penny theory. I mean, what you do is you end up having people reading this pamphlet and they get panicked because they don't understand what the true deal is. You don't see them all down here today, do you? So they sign this petition. Why? Because they think this horrible, terrible thing is happening to their golf course and their community, when in fact that's not the case at all. This is an enhancement to it. It's an improvement to it. We think it's entirely within the purview of the covenants and the design review board. And, with respect to, I think, is item number 4, the Shanahans have property rights too. I mean, they have probably the biggest commitment and investment in this community. And if you look at, this is the entire Ridges development. You've got Pacific Street, you've got 180th Street, you got West Center Road, and you got 192nd Street. The biggest property owner in this development are the Shanahans, operating not only the country club, but also the golf course. They have the biggest investment in this entire area to make sure that it looks great, that the integrity is wonderful, that the character of it is wonderful, and it attracts people not only to the neighborhood, but also to the country club and the golf course. And they have property rights as well. As far as the Brockemeyer Skyline Woods issue, that was a completely different matter. That was completely distinguishable. In that particular case, they were trying to redevelop the entire golf course. They let the golf course deteriorate to the point where it couldn't be used as a golf course anymore. The Shanahans just put in almost $5 million into this golf course, and they're continuing to maintain it as such. I think what you look at is the master plan, you look at the land use aspects of it, and clearly this falls within the low-density residential housing, and we think it's consistent with the integrity and character of the neighborhood. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I don't know if Mr. Steve Shanahan has anything to add to the rebuttal, but
I had closed the public hearing. If somebody wanted to call Steve up there, sure, welcome to.
Sure. Can I do that?
Or I'll call you up, Steve. Go ahead, come on up.
Hello, folks. My name is Steve Shanahan, and my address is 2029 South 189th Court, 68130. And I'm the owner and founder of Shadow Ridge Country Club, and I think many of you might have played it, may have not. But I just wanted to say, to start with, it's my son that wants to build his home there on number 8 on my golf course. Obviously, abutting the back of number 8. And I'm having second thoughts about it because the house that I see there is going to cost quite a bit of money. I'm going to have to give him a raise. So in that respect, I sort of agree with the Campbells a little. But in all honesty, you know, property rights don't belong to just one person that adjoins the property. The property rights belong to the people that own the property. Now, as far as precedent, we've done this same thing 10 times with areas that they call it valuable unused property that happens to be valuable because why? Our golf course. Our golf course has created hundreds of millions of dollars in construction, in property taxes, in the development of the community. And the Campbells have they have a perfect right to not want something built back there. I understand that, but they also have a right to join my club, and they could have a perfect view of number 8 as they come down the fairway and play the golf hole. They are not members of Shadow Ridge. And so I think it's a little disingenuous to consider that their property rights bleed over onto my property. And this has been going on, and I've listened to it, and I've sort of ignored it, but I go, when does common sense sort of kick in? And by the way, the pictures that the Campbell showed you were old. That's not what that view looks like now. There's trees back there like you can't believe, the trees that Larry has shown you in the photos. So you cannot see their home from my son's proposed site, and they can't see anything. Now, in all honesty, I've sort of stayed in the background because we have a lot, probably bigger fish to fry. We're doing a lot of things development-wise out there as far as the golf course. We've just renovated and redone the entire golf course. And that brings me just to my final point. And it's really a sticking point with me. A number of times they've compared my facility that I started 25 years ago. When they bring up the little pamphlets of the plats and the illustrations, I created those. I'm the founder and owner of Shadow Ridge. I started, along with Tim McReynolds, the development part of that 27 years ago. So it's real important to me that the record is set straight, that to compare Shadow Ridge or have it in the same sentence as Skyline Woods is really offensive to me and borderline is libel. Skyline Woods, the guy that took that over, I knew well. He was a total nut job, and what he did is he tried to get the golf course and develop a water park and all these kinds of things. They're comparing my facilities
Steve,
with
I don't think
that.
Yeah, I don't think that's an issue with the board,
Okay.
the Skyline Woods. So
I'm sort of venting, I'm sorry.
yeah, I get that.
We, I take pride in my place. I started it. It's 25 years old now, and it's an absolute beautiful place. And nobody wants it more perfect than my family and myself. And my son to build a home on our property seems to me more than a fair thing. So, thank you, guys.
Thank you. Okay, Robert, go ahead and come on up.
Okay, just three things. The comment that Shadow Ridge has the largest largest investment, well, they might have the most land, okay, but they don't have the largest investment. It's the community owners of the ridges that would just a multiple of 10, which is...
We understand that
okay,
point.
so you understand that. The fact that it was alluded to that this has been done before, well, it might have been done before because people didn't realize that they could challenge it. Okay, that's why we're here. We're challenging it from a homeowner's perspective and our legal rights. And lastly, the notion that the pictures were old, well, they're not old. They were in March. That one picture that I showed you was probably a month ago. But just for the record, here's a picture back in March, okay? Again, showing the perspective that we have for our property. This is actually from a news crew that came out to look at this, okay? And so it's very clear of the vistas, et cetera, that we enjoy currently, unobstructed, and that's what we are fighting to keep, that those vistas be unobstructed. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Yeah.
You're not a member of the club?
I'm not, no.
You play golf?
I do.
Okay. Was there a
But
reason?
I'm also an accountant, and I do the math, and it's not a good use of my time because I don't have enough hours in the day to play enough rounds. But I love golf, absolutely.
Okay, and so you're there for the scenic view as much as you are for the golf course, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Anything else? Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, any comments, questions before we hear from the city? Eric, can we hear the recommendations?
Sure.
And any points you want to?
Yeah, I don't have a lot to say. We are dealing with one large platted lot, part of the golf course, splitting into two lots with a rezoning for that new residential lot. As Larry had mentioned, there would be a minor amendment required to the special use permit for the outdoor sports and recreation. That would have to be submitted before this could go to city council. I do want to point out the city is not party to private covenants with this development or any other development around our jurisdiction. So, I don't really have a lot to say as far as what covenants say what, as far as this lot or that lot or whatnot. So we're specifically looking at our subdivision and zoning regulations, which this meets all of those. So the city is recommending approval of the rezoning from DR to DR in R4, approval of the preliminary plat subject to the two conditions listed in the report, and approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval, along with submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement if necessary prior to forwarding the plat to city council.
Any further
Yes.
comments?
I'll just make a comment and then
Go
a
ahead.
recommendation. The only comment that I want to make is that as we are not a party to the covenants, we are also not a party to any representations of the marketing of the properties when they were initially set up. What we are taxed with is looking at the applications that come before us to see if they fall within our code. And according to that, I'm going to recommend approval of the rezoning from DR to DR and R4, the approval of the preliminary plat subject to the two conditions in the department's report, and the approval of the final plat subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval, along with submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement, if required, prior to forwarding the plat to the city council.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Morris,
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Okay, moving on. Agenda item number 8, case C10-83-146, applicant, Security National Bank, request approval of a major amendment to an MD Major Development Overlay District, 1 Pacific Place. This was laid over from our August 1st meeting. Location, 1120 South 101st Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Planning Board and City staff. My name is Todd Swarzek with Noddle Development Companies, 2285 South 67th Street. I'm going to briefly recap what our request is and what the project is, as this is a layover case. First of all, we have a 4-story, 83,500 square foot building, approximately right here, with several residential units, so a mixed-use building, some internal parking, and then an adjacent detached 108,000 square foot, 373 stall parking garage. The original agreement dating back to 1985, we are requesting 3 changes from that agreement. The first being the use of residential on the top floor of the structure. Typically, that would be a conditional use permit. In this case, we are wrapping it into the major amendment. The second change that we are requesting is from a FAR requirement of 0.55 to an FAR of 0.7 for the office structures on this lot, which is much less than the GO code would allow. GO code would permit 1.5 FAR, and this is much less than that. And then finally, we're asking for an overall increase in the office square footage from the required 390,000 square feet to 455,000 square feet, and that's for the overall development. As we stated before at the last hearing, we've reached out to all of the adjacent property owners within the development. We've reached out to the Regency property owners, the Regency Townhouse property owners, and to the Sunset Hills Neighborhood Association. Those neighborhood associations have not had any problem with the development. We agree with the Planning Department's recommendation that we will create an administrative subdivision for this property to put the property into one lot to clean it up a little bit. We will seek signatures from all of the property owners in the original agreement. And then we will also get the approval of the One Pacific Place / Pacific Shores Architectural Review Committee. Our neighbor in the development, Broadmoor Development, had requested previously that the case be laid over. So we did have discussions with Broadmoor Development about their parking concerns. Jay Noddle is going to speak to that as he was involved in these parking conversations. And that's all for me. Thanks, Todd. Hello again. Jay Noddle, Noddle Companies, 2285 South 67th Street. As Todd mentioned, representatives of Broadmoor Development Company had some concerns about the availability of parking for the office structures in the One Pacific Place development. So I've had 3 meetings with Mr. Cooper and Mr. Stratton from Broadmoor Development Company. I've had 4 telephone conversations with Mr. Fellman from Broadmoor Development Company, and we have spoken to their, at their request, their consultant, Mike Purdy from Purdy and Slack. What we have agreed to is that the completed project, so the original building plus the expansion combined, will deliver 4.25 parking stalls per 1,000 usable square feet. And I think you have a letter on file from Broadmoor that says they can happily live with that. Happily might not have been their word, but they can live with that. And there were other conditions, acquiring the signatures of the other property owners in Pacific Shores, and certainly acquiring Architectural Control Committee approval. Broadmoor does sit on the Architectural Control Committee. So I think that everybody is comfortable that the availability of parking will be more than sufficient for this development. And the only other thing I would add is that, as we talked in a previous case, you have to measure the kind of office space, the type of tenants, and the location of the project when you make a final consideration as a developer, when you make a final consideration of how much parking is sufficient. These are expensive office buildings. This is at the higher end of the net rental conditions in the city. So I hope that. I'm sorry?
Is that parking ratio up from like 3.5 to 1 that Todd was talking about last time?
No, I think we were at 3.85.
Okay.
And again, as you know, you can measure based on gross, rentable, and usable, but we've done some pretty careful investigation. We know how many people are working in the current building, how many of those folks drive to work, and certainly those conditions can change in the future. But these numbers are higher than we would build a new project with.
Thanks
So
for
hopefully
meeting
that
with them.
answers everyone's parking concerns, and we'll look forward to heading on to the city council should you choose that that's appropriate for us to do so.
Thank you, Jay. Any other proponents that wish to speak? Any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments, questions? Eric, may we hear from the city?
Yeah, I don't have much more to add. We had originally a recommendation of approval last month before some questions came about with the specific language in the development agreement. So that being said, the city recommends approval of the major amendment to the One Pacific Place Development Agreement subject to the 2 conditions listed in the recommendation report.
Okay, do we have a motion?
Move to approve the major amendment to the One Pacific Place Development Agreement, subject to the 2 conditions listed in the report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Agenda item number 10, case C3-18-182, applicant, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. Request approval of an amendment to Chapter 53 subdivisions regarding perpetual easements. Location, Omaha and 3 Mile extraterritorial jurisdiction. May we hear from the city?
Yeah, so this is an amendment to Chapter 53 of the Omaha Municipal Code pertaining to the subdivision ordinance, specifically Section 53-85D, which addresses perpetual easements for Metropolitan Utilities District and any other natural gas provider. A handful of years back, there was another change to Chapter 53 that modified sidewalk width and adjacent landscaping, curbside landscaping. Those increased. Basically, it used to be 4 feet of landscaping, 4-foot sidewalks. It increased to 6.5 feet of landscaping and 5 feet of sidewalks. Due to that change, has caused MUD a few issues in installing their necessary utility lines. This amendment basically strikes one word. Before there had been an easement provided of 5 feet for all corner lots. This amendment would strike corner and basically pertain to all platted lots. And this will allow MUD the opportunity to install their necessary utilities in the proper location rather than having directly need to go to each adjacent property owner to do that.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Do we have a motion?
Motion for approval of amendment to Chapter 53, subdivisions regarding perpetual easements.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Yes.
I just assumed that was your recommendation.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes. Okay. We're going to take agenda items number 11 and 19 together, but we'll require a separate motion and a separate vote on each of those. Agenda item number 11, case C3-18-158. Applicant, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha, request approval of the 44 Douglas Student Housing TIF redevelopment project plan, location northwest of 44th and Douglas Street. And agenda item number 19, case C11-18-192, C12-18-193, applicant 44 Douglas Housing LLC, request preliminary and final plat approval of Briggs Place Replat 8, a minor plat inside the city limits, along with approval of a PUR planned unit redevelopment overlay district, location northwest of 44th and Douglas Streets. May we hear from the city. Don?
Yeah, Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning Department. I'll begin by talking about the tax increment financing project plan portion, item number 11 on your agenda, for the 44 Douglas Student Housing Project. It's a proposal for a 4-story apartment building, 120 studio efficiency style market rate units. They're intended to serve as student housing for students at the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and it's very near the UNMC campus at the corner of 44th and Douglas. Previously, there have been 6 single-family lots in that area, or in this project plan. Those homes are now gone, and the sites are consolidated into a single site. On-site parking will consist of 33 spaces on the north side of the building and an additional 87 spaces leased across the street from the University of Nebraska Medical Center. The applicants are Green Slate Development and Clarity Development. A couple of visuals for the project. That's a proposed apartment building. Total project cost is a bit over $12.5 million. The TIF support requested is $2,173,800. The project meets the criteria for the TIF program. It's an appropriate land use for the location, and it complies with the goals of the city's master plan. Thank you. Got another rendering I'll put up as well. That's it for the TIF portion of the presentation.
Okay. Do you want to talk about? Okay. Is the applicant here for agenda item number 19?
Hello, I'm Eric Westman with iPointer Makedo Architecture, 1516 Cumming Street. As was mentioned, it's currently 125 efficiency units. That's something that the developer, and they're all here with me also, have worked out with the UNMC, and it's a kind of a very valuable residence in their neighborhood. And beyond what he's mentioned, we do have 6 on-street parking stalls. We're also adding parking nodes and doing the city-compliant street lighting and sidewalk. And beyond that, we're here to answer any questions if you have them.
Okay. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak?
Good afternoon. Tom McClay, 3814 Farnham Street here in Omaha. On behalf of the owner, the development group, the applicant, Matt Dwyer and Jay Lund, co-owners of the project, are also here with me to answer any questions. I would, a little bit more specification, As Eric had indicated, we've been working with the Med Center here on this for quite some time. The land was actually acquired a while ago to conceiving this project. The land was acquired. It is not limited to student housing. It is certainly targeted more towards student housing, but we do anticipate, like some of our other projects in the Blackstone district, there will be workers, part-time students, part-time workers, full-time workers, all associated with the Med Center. There is not any really, this will be the closest housing to the Med Center that exists, virtually on the Med Center campus, which we've been encouraged by our other projects in the area, as well as the Med Center itself, in their response to this project. So any other questions, we'll be happy to answer them. Thanks.
Any other proponents? Are there any opponents? Close the public hearing. Any additional questions, comments from the board? Eric, do you want to add anything?
I'd like to just give the brief recommendation for the TIF and then maybe come back and just explain a little bit with the PUR.
Do you want us to take the vote after you give?
Yeah, let's do the TIF here.
Okay.
So agenda item 11, case number C3-18-158, department recommends approval.
Do we have a motion?
I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Maggot?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay. Eric, do you want to comment on agenda item number 19?
Yeah, so this is the plat and PUR portion of this project. There's multiple zoning waivers incorporated in, including setbacks, impervious coverage, off-street parking, and a few others. The applicant has indicated a lease agreement of parking with an adjacent parking structure. So we will need an agreement that is clearly defined and, clearly marked before this case could go to city council, designating a certain amount of stalls in that location and for a certain time period. So we are recommending approval of the preliminary plat, subject to the 4 conditions listed in the recommendation report. Approval of the final plat, subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding to city council. And approval of the PUR, subject to the submittal of acceptable revised PUR plans and executed parking lease agreement with UNMC prior to forwarding to city council.
Any questions or comments on agenda item number 19? Do we have a motion?
I move for approval of the preliminary plat, subject to the 4 conditions in the department's recommendation report. Approval of the final plat, subject to the conditions of preliminary plat approval and submittal of an acceptable final subdivision agreement prior to forwarding the request to city council for final action. And approval of the PUR, subject to the submittal of acceptable revised PUR plans and an executed parking lease agreement with UNMC prior to forwarding to the city council.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Maggot? Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Moving on, agenda item number 12, case C3-18-181. Applicant, Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha, request approval of the Habitat for Kuntz Park 5 TIF redevelopment project plan. Location, various properties within an area bound by Sailor Street to Evans Street from 18th Street to 24th Street. May we hear from the city. Don?
Yes, good afternoon again. Don Seaton, Omaha City Planning. This is another TIF project plan brought to us by Habitat for Humanity. It is an affordable housing project. They'll be providing 24 single-family homes on scattered sites right around the King Science School area north of Kuntz Park. 22 of these homes will be new construction. 2 of them will be existing buildings, will be rehabilitated. The lots are owned mostly by Habitat. Some are land bank lots, some are city-owned lots. There's been some demolition to clean up the area, get rid of dilapidated structures, clear off some lots that have been overgrown with vegetation, so trying to transform the area nicely. Total project investment is a bit over $5 million. The request for TIF support is $405,000. Project meets the criteria of the TIF program. It's an appropriate land use, single-family homes in a single-family neighborhood, and it complies with the goals of the city's master plan. We ask for your approval.
Okay. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any questions, comments? Eric, may we hear from the city?
Department recommends approval.
Do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosehacker,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, we're going to take agenda items number 13 and 25 together. They'll require a separate motion and a separate vote for each of those. Agenda item number 13, case C3-18-183, applicant Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha. Request approval of an amendment to the future land use element of the city's master plan from office commercial to industrial. Location 13909 and 14001 L Street. And then agenda item number 25. Case C10-18-199, applicant Chris Olson. Request rezoning from CC to GI. Property is located within a flood fringe and a floodway overlay district. Location 14001 L Street. May we hear from the city on agenda item number 13?
Yeah, so this request is to amend the future land use map it originated with a request for one property, 14001 L Street, which is agenda item number 25. There was a rezoning request. So the future land use amendment was made for that property. It's shown as office and commercial, whereas the vast majority of the properties along this stretch of L Street are shown as industrial. And looking at, during our review, we noticed that the adjacent property to the east at 13909 L Street was also designated for office and commercial in the future land use, although it was being used industrially. We added that to the request. We reached out to the representation of that property, and they did not express any reluctance to the change.
Do we have any other proponents? Do we have any opponents that wish to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public hearing on agenda item number 13. Agenda item number 25. May we hear from the applicant, please?
I don't
The
see,
applicant is not
they
here.
were here. I believe they maybe stepped out. I could briefly say this would have been on consent with, there wasn't the future land use map, but we wanted to combine them. The request we received was to rezone the property from CC to GI to more adequately address the land uses that had taken place on the site.
Okay. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Any opponents for agenda item number 25? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Eric, should we take number 13?
Yes.
Okay.
Department recommends approval.
Do we have a motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yeah.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosehacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay. Agenda item number 25. Can we hear from the city?
Department recommends approval.
Move for approval?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid, Rosehacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay, agenda item number 14, case C3-18-180. Applicant Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha request approval of the surplus declaration and disposal of city property. Location adjacent to 721 South 210th Circle and part of Lot 322 Skyline Ranches 3. May we hear from the city?
The city received a request from the property owner of 721 South 210th Circle to declare surplus the 2,400 square foot piece of land directly adjacent to his property north of Pacific Street. This piece of property was formerly owned by the city of Elkhorn, and after the annexation, it became the city of Omaha's property. During this request, we send documentation around to finance departments, parks department, public works, and planning to get input to see if this property is eligible for surplus. There are no objections from other departments, and we're recommending approval.
Any questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
Motion approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you please record the vote?
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Agenda item number 15, case C3-18-145. Applicant Planning Department on behalf of the City of Omaha request approval of the Blackstone Hotel TIF redevelopment project plan. Location 302 South 36th Street. Bridget, you usually don't have to wait this long. May we hear from you, please?
Well, good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board. Bridget Hadley, City Planning. This is a unique situation, so I want to take a brief moment to give a bit of history to explain why this is back before you. And I will explain this map along the way. The map does represent the Blackstone Hotel Enhanced Employment Area District and the TIF redevelopment project plan. The TIF redevelopment project plan is right here, this shape right there. That project plan was, as you may recall, for 205, approximately 205 now, hotel rooms of an upper upscale hotel. On July 11th, the Planning Board did recommend approval of that project plan. Within that project plan, there were funding sources that were listed. Two of those were TIF financing, and another source was EEA, or a general business occupation tax. So it was the applicant's intention to request the use of the general business occupation tax, as well as to request an EEA designation. However, there were no statements in the TIF, the planning documents that were before you that indicated that it was the applicant's intention and they were requesting an EEA designation, as well as the use of those, the occupation tax. We have since inserted that language so that it is clear in the plan documents that the plan does, that it is the applicant's intention and request to have an EEA designation, as well as use the general occupation tax. Since you all approved the plan July 11th, there was a change to the community development law that went into effect after you guys approved it, requiring modifications to the plans to go back to the planning board. So that is why we are back, just to basically represent that the project in its general scope as you all had approved it on July 11th has not changed. There's still TIF. The funding sources are still the same, so TIF and EEA, the request for the general business occupation tax, but it is to make sure that there is clear language in the plan documents stating the request for, and I believe my memo to the planning board is much more concise. It states that there is a request for the designation of the enhanced employment area. It states that there is a request to utilize the general business occupation tax, And also, we wanted to make sure we added that this particular hotel is a local landmark. With that, I have no more to say and would also ask for your approval on this as well. And I know that representatives, the owners actually of the project are here if you should have any additional questions.
Thank you, Bridget. Are there any other proponents that wish to speak? Are there, go ahead.
Excuse me. I forgot to add, as I had this map up here, so this is the TIF project plan, but the rest of the yellow highlighted shapes represent the other properties that are part of the EEA designation, or the Enhanced Employment Area designation. So that's what this map represents. The applicant's request to have this be the district and the designation on these properties, including the TIF project, as well as the map represents the TIF project. So I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. Any other proponents? Any opponents? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Any comments or questions before we hear from Eric?
I do have a question for Jay, if I could ask Jay to come up on this. Thank you, Jay.
Jay Lund, 3814 Farnham Street.
So, in reviewing the sources and uses statement that were submitted prior against the most recent ones that you've submitted in here, there's a significant difference in the enhanced employment area occupation tax. You went from almost $10 million up to $22 million. Can you tell us why there's such a difference between, I don't know how long ago you first submitted it and this most recent request?
Yeah, and I think I'm going to call in the pro here.
Well, I don't know if that's the right description. Tom McClay, 3814 Farnham Street. As we have been working with the city, the overall costs, the financing packages we put together, as you guys have seen, is a very complicated capital stack. I've been doing this for a while, and this is the most complicated I've ever done, and that includes affordable housing tax credit deals, which are their own beast. The financing on a hotel has been a little bit slippery in terms of what we can get from both a leverage standpoint on the overall permanent loan on the hotel, as well as the financing costs associated with occupation tax, TIF, and then overall construction loans have gone up, oh Jesus, almost 200 basis points since we started this project about a year ago. So those overall financing costs, when you're looking at a long time frame like all of these are, we're talking 10, 15 plus, 20 some years in these construction loans, added up really rapidly. Additionally, we have a lot of costs related to being an upscale hotel. We are excited. We do have a brand that we are working with. We're finalizing the details, which are adding additional kind of overall expenses, but that's also bringing down some of our other financing capital stacks. So this is really to balance out some of those additional financing costs that we're looking now that are coming down the pike at us.
And you also did not get the new market tax credits either.
We did the new market tax credits. We have enough structuring, legal structuring issues on this. I don't think we would get to the finish line, so we've elected to take that out of our capital stack to hopefully get this project done as quickly as we really want to, and bring the Blackstone Hotel back to the city of Omaha.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Eric, do you want to add anything?
Just recommend approval.
Do we have a motion?
I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid? Rosecker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Motion approved.
Okay. I think we're moving on to agenda item number 24, case C10-18-198. Applicant Jesu Housing Incorporated request rezoning from R535 to R5, location 4339 Lake Street and 4143 Grant Street. May we hear from the applicant, please, if they're here? Nope. Any proponents that wish to speak? Any opponents? Sir, this is your, okay, yep, come on up.
Yes,
You got to come up and give your name and address, please.
Eugene Papan, 4421 North 59th Street. That property, Clifton Hill District, Lot 8, Block 11, it belongs to him. He's my dad, my father. He is wondering if what does rezoning R535 to R4, how will it affect that property of the 4329 Lake? And also, will rezoning affect its dimensions of 50 by 120 feet?
Okay, those are your two questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
Basics.
Do you have anything else you want to say, or?
No,
Any
he
other
just
questions?
asked for my help in this matter, and
I understand.
it's interesting learning about all this stuff. It's
I thought we
not
might
beyond
put you
me.
to
It's just,
sleep
I
out
don't know all the terms.
Okay. Are there any other opponents that wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Eric here will answer your questions.
Okay, so this request by Jesu Housing for these two properties, these are both vacant lots. They're wanting to build a new home on each lot. The existing zoning requires the house to be built 35 feet back from the front property line. The rezoning to R5 would allow them to build the house at 25-foot setback. So rather than 35 feet, it would go to 25 feet. They actually already received a waiver from the Zoning Board of Appeals to allow that setback, but upon a condition of approval of that request, the Zoning Board of Appeals said come and rezone to R5. So it doesn't change the size of the lot. They both will remain 50 by 120, 6,000 square feet in size. It basically just changes that front setback where the new home can be.
It doesn't impact his.
It does not impact any adjacent properties. It's just 4339 Lake Street and 4143 Grant Street.
I see. Okay.
But we send notices to property owners within 300 feet of any zoning change to let neighbors know that there is a change, but it shouldn't have any impact on his property.
On the size.
No.
What about the property tax for? My dad's under the Homestead Act umbrella for that property, but in future times, he might will it to one of his sons. Will that affect the property tax, having it from that or rezoning?
No, it will not. What's his address?
The address that 4329 Lake. He owns that property.
4339 Lake Street?
29.
4329.
Like two
so it's
houses
adjacent.
down, I
Okay.
think.
No.
Yeah.
No, there shouldn't be any impact. Like basically he said, there'd be a new house that's built at
There's
4339.
like 3 or 4 of them within eyesight of.
Yeah,
of,
but it will not, I mean, I don't know how many homes are being built in the area.
There's a whole lot.
I mean, the assessor's office can look at the neighborhood as a whole, and they can always reassess property values, but I wouldn't expect 1 or 2 new houses would impact you.
Okay, all right. All right, that's all I need to know.
All right, thank you. Thanks
Continue, yep.
for being patient.
Department recommends approval of the rezoning.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Motion for approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Magid?
Yes.
Rosecker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Agenda item number 27, case C7-14-145. Applicant Reverend William E. Sanderson, St. Stanislaus Catholic Church. Request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow religious assembly in a R435 district, location 4002 J Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. My name is Daniel Sanyuk, 13814 South 47th Street in Papillion, Nebraska, 68133. I'm one of the deacons at St. Stanislaus Church and am representing Father Sanderson this afternoon. Thank you for your time in reviewing our request. And I'd also like to thank the planning board staff that helped me to put this request together in the first place. It only went through once. It didn't ever get rejected and kicked back to me, so I got good guidance. Thank you. Our proposal is to construct a monument on our property at the proper setbacks that will house a sign within, and we are proposing a single-sided, multi-lined red amber message board sign on our property. The monument's going to be constructed of stone to match our church, and I provided copies of the proposed elevation of the monument. It is intended that we would use that sign to display different mass times and other general information related to the operation of our parish. And we have several events that go throughout the year that it would be useful to have an electronic type sign to provide updated information on those events. It is our intent to use the sign during daytime and early evening hours only. We will not be using the sign at night. It shouldn't be a nuisance to any of our neighbors. In addition, a couple of things that I didn't identify in the original request. The Consortium of Catholic Schools recently reopened a dual language academy in our what was formerly closed St. Stanislaus School. It had just opened in the last few weeks, and it is looking like it's going to be a great success. Initially, they were expecting 50 to 60 new kids at the school, and we have an enrollment of well over 80, and they expect it to continue to grow. In that case, the sign that we are proposing can also be used for notifications related to the Dual Language Academy that's located immediately across the street to the south, across J Street from our church. And we can also post those messages, because it is a dual language academy, in both English and in Spanish, which would be of benefit to our neighborhood and our community. Finally, we did provide our own notices to all the neighbors within a 300-foot radius of the proposed sign. We received no negative feedback, but I did receive plenty of positive feedback. Then they thought that it was long overdue for that monument to be constructed on our property. I think that what is at contention here is the use of an electronic sign, and I am proposing that we use an electronic sign. It's easier to change the letters, the lighting, it's controllable. Information can be changed easily. No one has to go out and unlock, and it's hopefully not as prone to vandalism. Those are all of my comments. Again, I thank you for your time and for listening to our request this afternoon.
Thank you, Daniel. Any other proponents that wish to speak?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Vinny Palermo, 4520 South 41st Street. Here before you today. I also received one of those letters, living in proximity of this sign. Daily, I talk about quality of life, and although sign might be small, and what we've heard already today on this very long meeting, I'll keep this short, it helps with that. not only do we have a new school across the street, which is obviously a great asset to the neighborhood, we have a new neighborhood association. The church is doing great things, and this sign will be one of those welcoming doors as you turn the corner, and it's right there. I know from reading through that normally it's high schools only. I'd like to remind you that as Omaha keeps growing, there are middle schools and unfortunately some elementary schools that are slyly getting up in population to rival the numbers of high schools. So as we look at that, I think we need to see what's going to benefit certain neighborhoods to help them, and this sign will definitely do that. As far as the people that are coming and going, like was mentioned earlier, the school that has opened up, a lot of the parents that go to this school, they don't live in the neighborhood. And as they wait in line, like most schools, they will get information that maybe they weren't aware of to continue to build on the neighborhood. So thank you for your time. I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Vinny, are you a member of the church or just a neighbor to the church?
Member, yes. And I'll add that the sign does face towards my house.
You'll make sure it's shut off when it's supposed to be.
Absolutely. And if not, I know somebody I can call. So.
You'll also be in trouble if you don't show up, right?
Absolutely. They'll knock on my door for sure.
Do either of you know how many members you have in your congregation?
I could guess. And we've joined with Holy Ghost, so.
Oh, did you?
Yes.
Daniel
Sanyuk,
Thank you.
Deacon, St. Stanislaus. Currently, we have about 600 members within our parish, and as Vinny has pointed out, we have a combined parish with Holy Ghost, so we share activities with them as well. We have a single pastor, Father Sanderson, who says masses and oversees all the activities at both parishes. Between the two parishes, I believe there would be in the area of 600 to 1,000 people.
Thank you.
Okay. Do you have anything else, Vinny?
I would like to add that Holy Ghost is now at St. Stan's because of the fire that took place at Holy Ghost. So a lot of those members are at St. Stan's now until they get in there and do the upgrades they need to do to get it back open, unfortunately. So besides the number of people that are at Mass daily and weekly, if you add up all the parents along with the students that are there, it is indeed a great number.
Find the cause?
I want to say electrical, but don't.
It wasn't a ghost?
Maybe. A Holy Ghost, if sure.
There must have been a reason for it, though.
Any questions?
No. Are there any other
Thank you very much.
proponents that wish to speak? Are there any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Any additional comments, questions?
Yeah, I just have comments. I think this is a reasonable request. Given the circumstances, you have a lot of activities going on. Messaging is important. I know you probably have your weekly bulletins where you try and get the message out, and that's important. But not every member probably picks up a bulletin as well. So I think it's a reasonable request. I know the department's recommendation is denial, but I think it's a reasonable request. The sign's only 12. How big is the sign space?
It's going to be about 12 square feet.
12 square feet, which is well within, I believe, the required square footage. So it's not real dominant, and it's not going to be that bright. So I think it's a reasonable request, and I'd probably vote to support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
I think it's a good idea, but we should have it on all night.
May we hear from the city, please?
Sure, yeah, so you heard it mentioned briefly there that the department supports electronic messaging for high schools. Those are viewed more of it as a campus, a lot of activities going on. They're on major arterial streets, multiple street frontages, but that we don't usually support them for middle schools, primary schools, and churches. So we've been pretty consistent in that. Based on the residential zoning designation, It requires a use permit, and that's why the applicant is not able to go straight to the Zoning Board of Appeals to ask for the waiver. It has to come before you first. So we are recommending denial of the request for the major amendment to the conditional use permit. I do want to point out, just because Mike opened up that possibility, that if you are to approve, there are a couple of conditions that I would recommend to you. Number one being that receive the applicable Zoning Board of Appeals waivers for the electronic messaging. And then number two, compliance with the applicable performance standards. But our official recommendation is denial.
Okay, I just want.
Why is that the city stands where only high schools are allowed to have electronic signs and not churches or primary schools or secondary schools?
Well, you know, primary schools and churches, they're more in the middle of neighborhoods, whereas you think of a high school on the perimeter along major streets usually. It's just a different context. Electronic messaging, we've had issues with signs across our jurisdiction of flashing images, whether it's, you know, too quickly or, you know, there are certain parameters with electronic messaging that can be distracting for drivers or adjacent neighbors and residential properties. There could be a brightness factor, so, you know, summing it up, that's the best that I could tell you.
What was the second thing you said?
About compliance with the,
performance standards.
okay.
You know, when I'm looking at this electronic sign, it's, the actual electronic part of it's only 2 foot 7 inches tall by 4 foot 6 inches. I mean,
There's one color,
it's,
We were proposing two, red and amber.
that's not the biggest of signs.
I move.
Yeah, I'm kind of leaning towards the approval. We set a standard here, and we like to keep to that standard. Part of it has to do with schools. They do have a school right across the street. I mean, if we were talking about a 6 foot by 8 foot sign or something, that'd be different. But this message board is, you know, 2.5 foot by 4.5 foot. It's not very big.
It's not intrusive.
Yeah.
You can't have the NU flag on it.
I'm going to make a motion to approve the sign request, subject to the conditions of the planning department's recommendations, which is, I think you have got to go through zoning board of appeals, if I'm not mistaken, is that correct? As well as compliance with the performance standards.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please?
Rosacker?
Yes.
Moore?
Yes.
Pate?
Yes.
Morris?
Yes.
Carnes?
Yes.
Magid?
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
motion approved.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Moving on, agenda item number 28, case C7-17-228, applicant Steve Watts, request approval of a major amendment to a conditional use permit to allow kennel in a DR district, location 5622 South 185th Street. Is the applicant here? Would you want to come forward and present your case?
Hi, my name's Steve Watts. I live at the address listed in the.
Could you state the address, please?
5622 South 185th Street.
Thank you.
And I'm the owner-operator of Fidelity Canine. So, I do want to point out that I did get a letter from my closest neighbor just stating that, you know, she recognizes that there's been no impact to the neighborhood at all as far as noise goes and odor. I think the issues that that people would be concerned about would be, you know, odor and noise. in a kennel, barking dogs or odor from waste. And so I've shown that in the last year, my neighbors are not impacted at all. I mean, for the most part, nobody even knows I'm really there in my neighborhood other than what they might hear from satisfied customers. So, I'm asking for an increase in dogs and in that number, plus a few employees to kind of help. It's a 24/7 business, so right now I'm working about 100 hours a week. So I need some help so that I can just take some time off. But at the same time, I need to increase my number of dogs so that I can help pay for that too. Nothing's really changing in the way that I'm doing it, so I don't know why there would be any reason to deny me to have 8 more dogs. And I apologize, I don't really understand a lot of what goes on here. It's been pretty fascinating to sit in here today. But
we don't either, Steve.
This was sent as part of the packet of information that I got about it. And I wanted to point out that everything on this list is acceptable or existing. There's really nothing here that would indicate any reason other than just what it seems to me, and I hope it's not taken offensively, but it just seems that it just doesn't feel as right to go with 18 dogs as maybe 10. And so it seems arbitrary to me, I guess.
How are the 18 dogs, whether you have 1 or 2 people there, are they kept inside? Are they kept outside?
Yeah.
Are they segregated? Are they?
Yes. So all the dogs are kept in kennels in the basement of my house. Okay. And it's a pretty good sized house for just the fact that only 2 people live there, myself and my wife. So we live on the upstairs, and then the dogs are kept downstairs, except with the exception of 2 of our personal dogs are actually kept upstairs. So right now, only 8 dogs are really down in the basement.
Boarding or training facility?
It's a boarding and training. So our model for training is more geared towards a boarding model. So a lot of trainers will do private training in homes, but my opinion is that this is superior to any other training model. It allows me to do all the training with the dog so that I can be consistent. I'm going to be more consistent than somebody who's not a professional trainer with the dogs. It allows them to learn better. And
is it more obedience, or is it like
absolutely
get them to fetch their paper or a cup of coffee, or how do you?
Yeah, no, it's mainly just obedience.
If you can do that, man, that'd be a big business.
Agreed. No, so it's mainly just basic obedience. But one of the things I wanted to point out is that, throughout our neighborhood, you hear ordinary folks' dogs barking here or there. But my next door neighbor, who lives the closest to me, will tell you that she never hears my 10 dogs. I have been full almost since I was approved for 10 dogs.
We had a letter of. So then Marcus Servos, is he on the other side?
He is actually, if you look at the map, you'll notice that he is, he's actually about here. So he's the furthest away from me of any of them.
Use your finger.
Sorry.
He's where?
Where are you at? Where is he?
There. So this is the corner, the far corner of my property line here, and he is in here somewhere.
How big is your lot?
It's a full acre.
Okay.
1.08.
You can understand why people get concerned, probably.
Sure. Well, for me, it's very important to have good relationships with my neighbors. Both to not bother people who don't want to talk to neighbors, and to be friendly to my neighbors, and to respect the fact that, we all work all day long, and we want to have, quiet and, comfort in our homes, when we're home. So, I live there, so.
How was the average stay of the dogs?
It's the average stay.
Yeah.
I have a 3-week program and a 6-week program, but I would say the average is the 6-week. Most of them are there for that, full 6 weeks.
Okay, any other questions for Steve? Any other proponents that wish to speak? Any opponents? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. I'm sorry, did you?
I was gonna make one other statement.
Oh, I'm
too,
sorry.
No, that's fine. If for whatever reason you decide to deny my request, then I would just ask if it's, if I can't have 18, can we meet somewhere in the middle so that I can at least increase that number? And that additional employee that I've asked for, which was, I asked for 2 and the recommendation was for 1, that additional employee really is needed. That'd be very helpful. Because like I said, it's a 24/7 business, and it's, you know, I'm the guy who answers the barks in the middle of the night when a dog's having problems, you know, health-wise or otherwise. And so I'm definitely going to be the guy on all night long, but plus all day too, so.
Okay.
So that's pretty much all I had to say about that.
All right.
I think the other thing, if we limit the,
So we have a couple options here, guys. It sounds like we can approve the request, we can deny the request. He's talking about meeting in the middle, but could we also can we give him 2 employees and either no increase or a small increase of dogs? That's a possibility, right?
Well, he said he needed the additional dogs to afford the employees. Is that correct?
I don't need all of the additional dogs for the employees. See, part of the other statement that was made in there was that this seemed to be more of a commercial venture at those numbers. The reality is I can't I can't build enough wealth to go commercial if I don't have 18. At 14, I can afford the additional employees.
Is your plan to move it to a commercial facility?
Well, I mean, I mean, I'm a little biased, but I believe that my method for training is superior to everything else, and
because you're on site?
Not just because I'm on site, but because of the fact that the dogs stay with me, and because myself and my would-be staff are better trained to train dogs more effectively. And the benefit to the city really is, I want you guys to think about this too, is that, you know, as these dogs come through my program and then they go home, then they improve the value of life where they go as well, because they're less the barking dogs that you hear in your neighborhoods. They're, you know, the better, you know, behaved animals that you find in, you know, in the places that they go.
Do you have demand for that many dogs at one time?
Well, I'll be, you know, honest with you, I did not expect the business to be as successful as it has been. I mean, I literally, within a month of being approved for 10, I was full. And I have been full ever since then. In fact, also part of my problem is that I don't even have room to have the dogs come in and stagger, right? So I got 10 dogs, and I've got somebody that wants to start 2 days before this dog goes home. I can't take them because, you know, I could have 10 extra dogs in my house, and nobody would even know. But I'm obligated, aside from, you know, the city and what anybody else thinks of me, I'm morally obligated to abide by the rules. I color inside the lines. I'm not going to try to cheat the system or work around it. I could do it. You guys would never even know, but I'm not going to do that. And so these little things that I think other people, other organizations might say, oh, you know, it's not that big of a deal. We'll just slide them in there. Nobody's
You might have an undercover dog.
What's that?
You might get an undercover dog now.
Yeah.
It's a really big collar.
But, you know, so these kind of things, you know, they create issues for me, you know, so I can't get a boarding dog in for a weekend because I don't have enough room.
So you've been operating for about a year, is that right?
Yeah, since July 2017.
So if we said 2 employees, or if more than the number of employees, it should be like full-time equivalent, shouldn't it be? As far as, because you could have 1 employee and work that person for 16 hours, or you could have, I don't want to split hairs here, but at the same time, I want to be clear on our approvals or denials. So we could, so I'm tempted to say, you know, if the board goes along with it, you know, 12 dogs and 2 employees, you know, 2 full-time equivalents if he wants it, but it sounds like he'll have less because he won't be able to afford the amount. Does anybody else have strong feelings one way or another?
I'm okay with 12.
You like 12?
I'm concerned about increasing the number of dogs. Just what's the slippery slope? And at one point, are you back here in a year asking for more dogs? And especially if you said you don't, your model is keeping the dogs on your property, living with them. You don't necessarily want to grow and go into another space. I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with you that 10 is an arbitrary number, but any number can be an arbitrary number too.
No, I get it.
At some point.
I mean, 40 would be too much, obviously.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so where do you draw the line? I get that, and that's why, you know, I drew the, you know, I have the map that shows the space in my basement, and one comment was made that, you know, there showed 19 kennels even though I was asking for 18. You know, that was just to kind of show you that, you know, there is a lot of extra space there, that I have plenty of space to, for the dogs to be treated well. And
did you buy the property for your business?
No,
You lived there?
No, I've lived there for 10 years.
So what's the average tenure for your dog? How long do they stay?
6 weeks.
6 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
If we can get you 12, is that okay? With 2.
Honestly, I'd really like to have 14 if you could do it. But I'll take 12 if it's what I can get. I'll take what I can get.
What do you have now, 10?
Mm-hmm.
So 2 wouldn't be that big of a.
You're lucky I'm a cat guy, but I feel for you.
Okay, any other questions for Steve? I think I did close the public hearing, didn't I? Okay.
14.
May we hear from the city?
That's pretty straightforward for the request. Obviously, the major amendment to increase from 10 to 18, as Steve has mentioned, and have 2 additional employees. The city views this as, you know, this is obviously a residential neighborhood first and foremost. We believe the proposed increase in dogs really takes it to a commercial level that would probably fit in better at a commercial location. So with that, we can't support any more than the 10 dogs, but in our condition number 1, we are saying that we would be okay with 1 additional employee. If you make any changes, you would have to modify condition number 1, but our official recommendation report is approval of the major amendment to the conditional use permit to allow a kennel in a DR district subject to the 4 listed conditions.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the major amendment to the conditional use permit to allow a kennel in a DR district subject to the 4 conditions, revising number 1 to 12 dogs and 2 full-time equivalent more employees.
So you want that to say 3 employees, the
Well,
owner and 2?
the operator, and then 2 if he wants 2 additional employees, but we're limiting the dogs to 12.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Morris,
No.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
I'm voting no, only because I don't think 12 does enough justice to it.
motion, oh,
I haven't
Mr. Chair.
voted. No.
1, 2, 3, 4. So motion approved.
Motion approved.
4-3, it approved, okay.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, the last case here, agenda item number 29, case C7-18-200, applicant Robert E.
Hold on for a second. You want to do another motion?
Wait a second.
Can we do another motion?
I thought we voted on that motion, wasn't it?
You'd have to ask Alan, but I don't think you can.
Alan, who wanted to make another motion? We already had a motion and voted and it passed. Done, correct? Yeah, okay.
Motion to approve the matter passed by 4 votes, then it's done.
Yep. All right. Agenda item number 29, case C7-18-200, applicant Robert E. Lorenz. Request approval of a conditional use permit to allow body and fender repair services in a DS district, location 1011 North 18th Street. May we hear from the applicant, please?
Good afternoon. I'm Paul Kelly. I'm an architect working with Bob. Bob's here too.
Okay.
My address is 440 North 61st Street. We had a little development on our plan. Essentially, Mr. Lorenz purchased a project earlier this year. It had been traditionally used as an auto service type facility. Actually, frames and suspension work is what had been used there in the past. And we do have a set of remodel drawings from 1987. But essentially, Mr. Lorenz was looking, he has a couple guys doing just some fender straightening or frame straightening work there. And they were looking to expand and just put in a paint booth. And at that point, he approached the city and was told if he wanted to do that kind of work there, he would need the conditional use permit. And so that's kind of where how we've gotten to where we are right now. And being last on the agenda, I'm sure you probably suspect we're the last ones to get the application in. And we were kind of scrambling to do that. And since that time, we did come up with, I think, what might be a better plan option. And I don't know if I can submit that to you to take a look at this point.
Or if you want to put it on the screen or however you want.
Sure. Sure, thank you. I mean, I've got multiple copies. But essentially, it's a 15,000 square foot building. Was really constructed originally, I believe, probably the northwest corner, and then was added onto, and then essentially the whole east side was then added. So it's essentially 3 different structures. What we were originally proposing was where they have the service facility now is in the southwest corner. But in looking at what the city was requiring and the comments, essentially it seemed like the big issue was really off-street parking, that's not really allowed on the site since the existing building takes up the entire site footprint except for about 10 feet on the south side. So in talking through with Bob, what we'd like to propose would be to put the repair garage portion over on the east side of the building, and you can see the size of the paint booth and the 2 straightening devices would be what I call bay, where those fit. And then with the existing garage door at the north side of the building, that would allow a space for 12 cars inside the facility, which would be the quantity required for the 3 bays. So I want to at least kind of get that on the table, at least as trying to look at a better option than what we had submitted originally. Besides that, I mean, I know that Bob had gone and spoke to the help desk, the fire marshal, the building official, a lot of different people up the city. They're all real helpful. One thing that was noted was that the zoning, they did not have a current use listed for that property as far as from the planning department standpoint. But since that time, I have talked to Anna Bespoyazny, who's the head building official, and she noted that the building department did have a use as automotive services for that building. So a little bit here, we kind of heard we didn't have a use listed for the building, but, you know, from another venue, we're hearing that there is something on file to that effect. That's all I have, I think, to offer. I don't know if you have any questions or if Mr. Lorenz wants to add anything in particular.
I'll add.
Okay.
Step over here.
Yeah, give your name and address, Bob, and
Robert Lorenz, 421 South 91st Circle, Omaha, Nebraska, 68114. Do you have questions first?
go
Not
ahead.
yet? Okay.
Not yet.
Well, everything he said, plus, based on what I've heard here today, like with the Kiewit project and whatever, I think the days are numbered for that building and its location. I'm across the street from the Francis Center, which is kind of limited on what we can do with that building. We have to pick up trash and people over there 3 or 4 times a day. It's a real nice place, but its location it's going to get changed, I'm sure. I've talked with the administrator at the Francis Center, and they're doing some things down there, and they're concerned with truck traffic and other things, and we've had a lot of conversations, but nothing's really going to change down there for a few years. And based on what I heard in the Kiewit discussions, it takes a good decade to really get these whole areas revamped, and we're not really on the list yet on the other side of Cummings. So I think there's a good decade left of use out of that building before it gets torn down, and it is a good building. It's just really hard to find somebody to put in it because of its location. And, you know, I think having somebody in it and keeping the area clean. We have really nice sidewalks. The streets are already redone because they put in a big sewer over there. But if you look at the building, I mean, it's just 6 big garage doors. That's all it is. It's made for what it is. And really all we want to do is put in an appliance to make our work look better. And just want to do it legally. So he's telling me that that's how we do it if the city will allow it.
Okay. Any other comments you
Well,
want to make?
Other than, you know, I realize what I've got there, and it's a problem, but I bought it from the owner that has had that place. Her husband died, so that's why they sold it. It previously was Holt Spring Company, and what they did was make suspension parts and frame parts for mostly trucks, but just about any piece of equipment you could imagine. And they also had service vehicles that went out in the field, whether it was a broken semi or tractor or truck, car, or whatever. That's all that building's ever done. And there's layers of paint stuck to the walls where they had workbenches because some of the parts they manufactured themselves, and they painted them before they installed them. They painted their repairs. There's anchors in the floor where they have had to stretch vehicles back into shape to do the repairs and paint them. But today we like things to look a little bit better. So we currently have 2 frame machines down there for cars and pickups, and that's what we're doing. But we want to add the finishing touch, which now has to be shipped out, and it costs more money to get that done. It's a simple appliance. It's a paint booth. It's a square box with the right ventilation and temperature and filters, and we just want to put one in and use it until we can't anymore. And that's that.
Okay.
How long have you owned that building?
I haven't owned that building long. I was trying to build another one, but I gave up on it in a different part of town that is a little bit more.
You have no parking, right?
We have 16,000 square feet of it. That's inside.
Okay, and then,
Like, in your business, do customers, when I think, and we were talking about it in the pre-meeting, is when auto body and fender repair, you know, someone gets in an accident and they say, where do you want to tow it? Well, I know I know this guy, I'm gonna go take it to his place. Do you have people that come and drop cars off during the
By
weekends? or-
appointment, it's a two-man operation. This is not like Earl Scheib or Charlie Graham, or it's not a big insurance business type of thing. It's a two-man operation. We hope
It's
to do-
Robert Lorenz. That's more important.
What do you mean?
It's you.
Yeah.
So I understand that yeah, that
It
was
would be by appointment is
Do
what
you
I
have
mean.
so there's nothing outside that goes on really?
No,
Okay.
it's-
Do you rent any space from neighbors or anything to have outside storage? or
Don't
anything?
need it. There's so much space inside. I mean, it's not necessary.
Okay, so you're
Plus,
not
you
moving
don't-
you're not moving vehicles outside during the day.
We can't even open the doors. We've tried unless you're standing by the door and letting a car in, because the people from across the street come in.
Because they'll mess with the cars.
You don't know what they're gonna do.
Okay.
So how many cars do you work on at a time?
I was hoping for 2 or 3 a week, that's what I was hoping. But it's 2 guys, I mean, you can only do so much. It's just a little, this is not a big business. It's just something to do with this building that we can do, and it's always done anyway. It's just, I don't think by today's standards, it might not be legal without that booth, or healthy, So that's,
You said you do paint, did I miss that?
like to.
You get to put a ventilation system.
Yeah, that's the booth. That's what that's all about. I mean, again, they always have down there. There's paint that thick where the benches were along the walls where they'd spray their parts and whatnot. There was never anything there except an exhaust fan. But we're talking about, more detailed work, just not mass producing stuff, just fixing it properly. And right now we're doing frames, but can't really put the finishing touches on it. That's got to be shipped out to somebody that's got a body shop. And the doors, like I said, we're not even outside. We can't go outside without having somebody guard the door because of the area. And I know that's changing. Like there's a big apartment complex down the street, another one. As a matter of fact, I think there's only 3 people besides me that own property in that area, and it's the same 3 people. And they're just sitting on their property. They're not selling. It's just sitting there deteriorating.
So I assume you'll have the cars in your shop for a longer period of time because of the number of services, additional services that you're looking to
No, we just want to
provide.
paint them when they're finished.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right now,
So
we're
how long-
doing it
What's that process, 3 days?
to paint.
Yeah.
If it has heat, 1 hour. If it doesn't have heat, for temperature control, it takes an hour or so to paint it, but you have to let it sit overnight.
Right.
So it can dry.
So
Cure.
the paint is 1 day, basically. is what
Paint
you're
1 day, but it could take 3 or 4 or 5 days, depending on how much damage to straighten it. That's the work, is the.
saying. Where I'm going at with it is, are you gonna require, are you gonna have enough space if you have longer number of days that those cars are in your shop?
Yeah, we only, there's only a couple cars can be worked on at a time, and I think there's a good 16 parking spaces.
But you're appointment only, right? You're
Yeah,
appointment only.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't, like I said, you can't open the doors down there. It doesn't happen. We have 1 door with a fence across it on the inside, if it's real nice out, but. Other than that, nothing's really changing. We just want to install that piece of equipment. And like I said, I already know that the day's coming where that building's not going to be there. But it's not going to be when I'm around here. They're not on my side of the street yet.
Okay, thank you. Any other proponents? Any opponents? Close the public hearing. Any additional comments, questions?
I guess the only thing I would have a question is you had referred to being down at the city and talking about the usage. You said it's been approved for that facility?
It's an S1. It always has been, apparently. I only went down there to see what we needed to do, if we needed, and what we needed to do to put in a paint booth, because
it's, there's a lot of things that require permits, elevators, paint booths, whatever, I don't know what all. But I went down there before we got started, and the guy in the pre-plan room looked at the computer and showed me where it said that it had the right zoning with a conditional permit. So what do I need to do there? And that's to get an architect. That's what I know about that.
The zoning is correct. If you got it.
Well, yeah, the existing zoning district allows the use subject to conditional use permit. The problem comes into the available parking. So this district, it requires parking, and parking is based on a use type. Right. There's a few different use types, I believe, with the building, and I mean, that's the challenge in this site is, there aren't those available parking stalls, and, there's no parking lot associated with the site. And whereas maybe there is some indoor parking, however it's been operating or what uses in the past, it probably is a non-conforming situation. Well, then when you're proposing to change the use, and it brings up the conditional use permit process, it's challenging. I mean, perhaps the area, could be fit for CBD zoning or a rezoning change, but the problem is this use type wouldn't be allowed in that zoning district. So that's, not a solution.
Well, part of the challenge.
Parking be designated?
Well, part of the challenge is with this use type is, you do have the possibility of damaged vehicles being towed and dropped off, and I respect that the applicant says that it'd be appointment only, but we know how it works out there. That I've driven by body and fender places, and there's wrecked vehicles outside, and there's the challenge is that if that happens, we just have damaged vehicles parked on the street or in the right of way. If it's after hours.
We don't have anywhere, there's nowhere to possibly put, we take up the whole lot.
Where do you park? On the street?
Inside.
You park inside?
Yeah.
His point is that nobody parks outside there anywhere because of
Only, there are people parked outside, but they're all people living in their cars. Right. And we can't even go outside. But if, for our use, we don't have any lot to park on. All of our space is inside, and we only need 2 bays, and we got 16,000 square feet. There's tons of parking.
Well, so my question is, we allow indoor parking all over the city. So as a part of this application, can we designate that he has to maintain so many interior public parking spaces?
How else is the rest of the building being used?
It's not.
Okay, but is it open storage? I mean, it was my understanding that there were, because I think we calculated 22 off-street parking stalls required.
If you wanted to make them, and I don't see how 22, there's only 2 people, and we're only giving the body repair part half of the building because there's a wall. It actually has a different address than the front half of the building. And
is there a wall there, you said?
Yeah, it goes through the roof. It's not even actually.
What's in there?
Huh?
What's in there?
In the other half?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Let's show us the picture again because we only have a partial floor plan in our.
Yeah, maybe I can help with that.
Just a second, Paul.
Yeah.
Dave, Dave Fanslau, did you want to make a comment?
I do eventually, so.
You want to wait?
Sure, just give me an opportunity.
Okay. All right.
So this is a full plan of the whole building, and this is what we were just talking about as far as changing from what we had shown on your plan, which was a partial plan of the southwest corner, because that's where they currently have the service bays. And ultimately, the planning department was helpful in pointing out, hey, we need to find parking somehow, somewhere. And that's where, in the meantime, since we had made the submittal, Bob said, well, what if we can just put it all on the east side? We can get all the parking for the service bays on that east half of the building. So all of that service bay and its parking is contained in that area. The reality is they they've been cleaning up the office, but they haven't really, you don't have a use or a tenant for that at this point.
It's more of a, it's not some, it's just a big area. There's 2 little offices.
Yeah, and like I said, it was remodeled in '87. I mean, the reality is the bathrooms and things are probably almost ADA, even though it was done 3 years before ADA was passed. So I mean, the office is in fairly good shape, but they're currently not using it for anything. And I think when we had originally talked about this, was putting the storage was thought to be on the east side with the auto on the southwest, and we've kind of flip-flopped that. So to some extent, that's a little different than what you'd seen.
Mr. Lawrence, part of the problem is that you've got there's only so many use classifications in the zoning code, and so what happens is the amount of auto and fender body places that have 2 employees and 16,000 square feet is very rare. You know, we just don't. Yeah, we just don't have a classification for that, so it makes it difficult. The other thing is if this board approves it today, and then you sell the business and someone might want to have so I don't know how we restrict it, or, I mean, I fully want to support what you're doing, and I'd be tempted to vote in favor of it, but how do we control the next guy or gal?
I'm only asking for half of the building being used for that. It's not even actually attached at the roof. The beams don't sit on the other building. There's just a piece of.
I don't know. We can't do half of. I mean, I want to support this because I think I'm comfortable with what you're doing, but it's one parcel. It's one parcel, isn't it?
It's 2 addresses on inside.
Yeah, so it's 2 different addresses.
Does it matter?
A lot of buildings downtown are connected and they're for different people.
I'm gonna wait, Trenton, to get comment from Eric and from Dave Fanslau here.
Very good.
Dave, are you ready to?
I am, yes,
Okay.
thank you. Yeah, Dave Fanslau, Planning Director. I think I heard that that's the plan that we're being asked to consider right now. My staff has never seen that plan. So it makes me real nervous, no offense, but when any applicant shows up the day of the meeting, well, I'll put it this way. I'm a little nervous after we've started our review process, when folks submit things during the very short time period that we have to review cases, let alone the time they step up at the podium. There's no way we can, in my opinion, there's no way we can know if this new plan that we just saw 10 minutes ago meets any code. No idea. From a zoning perspective, from the buildings perspective, we've never seen this plan. I wouldn't feel comfortable recommending to you folks that we should approve something that we just saw 10 minutes ago. Board Member Morse said it a couple of cases ago, slippery slope. If we entertain new plans the day of the meeting, we risk mistakes.
Didn't we request that?
So, I'm not done, please.
Sorry.
I'd like to look into the CO. Anna works for my department. I would like to find out what the story is behind the CO. I haven't seen anything that says they have a CO. First time I've heard that there might be one floating out there. I don't know what it's for. I don't know if the building staff has looked at it, if they know what it is. And there's a life safety issues when you occupy buildings. So that makes me nervous as well. The site is what it is, right? It's property line to property line building. It's not meant for any off-street parking or parking on site because the building takes up the entire site. Yes, Mr. Rosacker, indoor parking happens and is allowed just like surface parking is, but it also has to follow the dimensions that are in the zoning code and the design requirements. Again, first time we've seen this plan, we can't tell you if they can park 10 cars in there, let alone what they're supposed to park. there's been some talk, we talked about it at pre-meeting, about what happens when somebody gets in a wreck and it gets towed here. And I get that you're an appointment-only shop, but what happens if I wrecked my car 6 months ago and these guys did a great job? I get in a wreck six months after that, the tow truck driver says, where do you want me to tow it? If I was happy with the service, I'm gonna tell them to tow it here. There's no way for me, I can't imagine, to contact these folks at 2 a.m. to ask them if I can tow their car. What happens if I just say tow the car there? Where are they gonna park it? I don't think the operating statement we have matches up with this plan. So my point is, there's a lot of issues that I've sat here and listened to that make me uncomfortable. And I don't know if Eric or anybody else on staff has comments, but those are mine.
Well, it sounds to me like, with the way this has become dynamic, that our wisest thing would be to lay it over.
I would have one more question. I just saw my note. Where do customers park who do transactions at this building? If I'm here to pick up my car or to check on it or to drop off a check or whatever it is, where do I park? Is there, and I don't know, so I'm asking, and maybe you guys have that answer. I don't think it's gonna satisfy me today anyway. But if I'm here to pick up my car and I get dropped off and the person who dropped me off has to wait until I get my car, where do they park? I mean, they can go park down the street, I guess, but there's no place for customers who are going in and out of the building to park unless that is gonna be provided inside, which we don't know at this time.
Can I address that?
Thank you.
Sure.
Yep.
Speak to the microphone.
Bob, you want to give your name and address again, just?
Robert Lorenz, 421 South 91st Circle, Omaha, 68114. As far as where do customers park, you can't in that neighborhood. You can't park. You have to be let in. It's an escort situation. You can't even open the door down there for reasons you probably already know, okay? So that's just the way it is. And I knew that when I got the building. So it's just not gonna happen. The other thing is how you're gonna get in unless I open the door. You're not. It just can't be handled any other way. There's no buildings down there that work that way except for U-Haul, and they have somebody out the door across the street from me. So that's the only way it can ever happen. I'm not gonna staff the door 20 or even 8 hours a day for somebody to get let in. As far as this being different, what you see up there, it's the same exact layout, dimensions, and everything. It's just that we received on Saturday, the day before the holiday, a notice that you were not interested in working with the situation. One, because of parking, and two, because that's not the direction the city's going. And I want to be able to use this building for something until the city has that in place. Based on what I heard Kiewit say, that's not, or whatever these people were doing down here, it takes a good decade to get this all in order. And again, we're on the other side of the street still, so it's going to be a long time. That building has to be used for something. You absolutely can't park outside and get into the building. When I come there, I have to leave out of my car and get to the door and keep people away from me, walk through their trash, unlock my door, push the button, come in, come back out, clean up everybody's mess, and that's what it's all about down there. This is not about having parking. There's so much legal parking inside my building. If you look at this, and I'm probably making people mad, but I can tell you that this has all been measured out, and these are legal parking places, including handicap. The reason that we changed the plans is because we just got notice Saturday before the holiday that this was going to be like this. Why they didn't come sooner, I don't know.
Robert,
This was in the record.
You got your recommendation report just like all at the same time frame that
Actually, I didn't get one, he did.
You got the recommendation report the same time everybody else was sent theirs. We have 2.5 weeks to pump out, in this case, 30 recommendation reports. They were finalized the Wednesday, a week ago. And we spend most of the day on Wednesday before this meeting finalizing these reports. We make revisions, we make multiple copies, they get it sent out Thursday, so they either arrive Friday or Saturday, that's typical.
I wasn't complaining because I didn't get one. I was just saying that the reason for the change, we're not trying to trick you. That's all measured out.
And all I'm saying is we haven't had time to review it, which is what we spend 2.5 or 3 weeks doing once we receive an application.
Understood.
I had additional questions, but I don't think I'm gonna ask them. I think, as you can well see, you're headed in the direction of a layover if you wanna continue on with the use that you would like to use this for. Don't you agree?
Would you accept a layover rather than a denial?
Well, I mean, you're headed for that unless you want us to take a vote today on this. And I would recommend a layover to give the city planning department time to look at a complete set of plans and to make their recommendations.
I think that's your best option.
Otherwise,
I agree, I just don't, like it. But,
It's better than a denial right now.
Pardon?
You're facing a denial possibly.
I know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, you heard what I had to say, and I don't disagree with anybody. I'm a property owner myself, but this is kind of a unique situation where it is, and it's not parking. If you measure it out, it's not.
No one will blame you for sugarcoating your building or the area, okay?
I just think, Mr. Fanislaw made great
Well, let's
comments,
go
great
home.
points there. I think it's appropriate,
you.
I think it's the appropriate
We'll get
measure.
I think
there.
we'd accept a layover if that's,
Okay,
if that's
let's,
possible.
we gotta make a motion and we'll get there. I think I closed the public hearing, didn't I? Kinda yes, but no, yeah. Eric, go ahead.
And I kind of had the same concerns that Dave had, and, just looking at the plan and, the operating statement and hearing what's going on, so, I was leaning towards recommending a layover so that we can sit down with the applicant and see what the options are, see if we can make this work. I think would be beneficial for the applicant, so we're recommending layover.
Motion layover.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote, please? Oh, wait a second. Do we need to put a timeline on that motion? I'm sorry.
30 days.
I don't think we need to come to a time frame. Our next deadline submittal is this upcoming Monday for the October meeting. For layover requests, we usually give them to the Friday to get any and all required materials in. So if the applicant and his representative are able to meet with us in that time frame and make the adequate changes to get in for the next meeting, that's possible. We have a lot of meetings though, so I can't make any guarantees, so it's possible it could be the November meeting.
Okay,
So I think just leaving it open-ended would be the best.
will do. We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
Yes.
Rosehacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
layover approved.
Okay. We need to have a, you bet.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for hanging around so
I
long,
didn't mean
guys.
anything by all that, it's just, until somebody stops me, I won't.
No,
stop.
not a problem. Okay, do we have a motion on last month's pre-meeting minutes?
I move to approve the pre-meeting minutes from August 1st, 2018.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Lisa, will you record the vote?
Magid,
Yes.
Rosehacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate, Morris,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Sorry, I forgot you, Ms. Carnes.
Oh, yes.
Okay, my bad.
I didn't realize you forgot me.
Approved.
Okay, do we have a motion on last month's minutes of the planning board meeting?
Move to approve the minutes from the planning board meeting of August 1st.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Lisa?
Rosehacker,
Yes.
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Abstain.
Magid,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
approved.
Do we have a motion for adjournment?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Lisa?
Moore,
Yes.
Pate,
Yes.
Morris,
Yes.
Carnes,
Yes.
Magid,
No.
Rosacker,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
You're gonna stay here all night?
Approved for 4:56 adjournment.